the March 9th regular meeting for the city of Pacifica. We have a roll call, please.
Councilmember O'Neill. Councilmember Beer.
Here.
Councilmember Vaderlaus. Mayor Pro Tem Beckmeyer.
Here.
Mayor Martin.
Here. All right, we have a salute to the flag led by Councilmember O'Neill.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, our consent calendar. Does anyone wish to pull anything? I don't have any comment cards.
I move that we approve the consent calendar as stated.
Second.
Please vote. That passes. Okay, and we will move on to oral communications at 7:01.
Wow.
I have one card. Jay Reese, except Jay, you want to talk about the tree on Canyon. So let's hold off on this because it's going to come up later, okay? Yeah. Great.
Comes another card. Tiger wanted to know why his... Oral com.
Okay, great. Tiger. And then we've got Carolyn Jaramillo.
And a couple more.
It is said that despite its many glaring and occasionally fatal inaccuracies, the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy itself has outsold the Encyclopedia Galactica because it is slightly cheaper and because it has the words, "Don't panic," in large, friendly letters on the cover. Good evening, Honorable Mayor and Council. I'm Tiger Jastrow's Big Stick of Pacifica. And I wanted to lead with that because I think right now it is helpful and very good advice. There is a lot of panicking going on. If you peruse your local grocery store's shelves without consulting with any of the citizenry, you may come to a similar conclusion, and that's before you flip on the news. Good advice is wash your hands. There's a joke running amongst us in the grocery store business right now as we stare at people selling out the shelf of hand soap that before, when we had very full shelves of hand soap, was it only recently that people discovered that washing one's hands is a way to preclude illness? So I'm up here cracking jokes for a simple reason. Washing one's hands is absolutely a great way to keep this thing in some measure at bay, as is drinking water and eating vitamin C right now to keep our immune system strong. The other way to keep our immune system strong is not to panic. Right now there's a thing happening, it's very large, it's hard to wrap our heads around. The thing that they're not telling us in the news is that the more we focus on what could go wrong and start worrying accordingly and creating these fear things in our body, the brain does produce chemicals, and a great way to weaken one's immune system is to focus on what we're afraid of. And I appreciate that right now, again, if you flip on the news, you might begin to have cause for alarm. But if you look around you right now, hopefully you don't have it, and if you don't have it, you're washing your hands, you're taking your precautions, you're making sure your mucus management is in check, and you're not spreading your own fluids from your hands to everything in sight. And if you've done this part well, and you're healthy, and your family's healthy, and you're living in a place that so far we're all healthy, notice that. It's helpful right now to just notice that we are healthy right now, and we don't need to be panicked right now. And we're doing what is best for our body's management right now. And if all those things are in check, those things that we can control, the more we don't worry about it, the more we're also controlling various chemicals in our brain that allows us to further bolster our immune system and begin our first means of defense if something should happen to come along that we don't want. So please, 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 my advice right now is begin there. Don't panic. After that, the other update to Safeway is that we have reached a tentative agreement, so we'll see in about a week from Thursday if that sticks. Thank you.
Thank you, Tiger. And then Carolyn Jaramillo, we have two cards for you. Do you want Suzanne to go before you, or? Carlin, you can come up.
Thanks, Deirdre. Suzanne Moore, Pacific Housing for All. The Unhoused in Pacifica Task Force is currently developing a fact sheet to address questions posed by the community. In the meantime, Pacific Housing for All wants to review what is known to date. It is the intention of our team to supply information to encourage support for future programs and alleviate fears recently voiced in the community. Question: who are the homeless in Pacifica? In a 2019 one-day homeless count, Pacific's count of 116 was the second highest in the county. 12.87% of our homeless were unsheltered. Of our homeless surveyed in motorhomes, 40% are long-standing Pacifica residents, 75% are employed, over 50% are over the age of 50, and over 50% became homeless due to increased cost of housing. We know from public health data that being homeless can reduce a lifespan as much as 10 years. Recent data in San Mateo County suggests that the homeless are 3 times more likely than the general population to develop colon cancer, and females are 6 times more likely to develop breast cancer. Stable housing improves health, and our county prioritizes housing first as a public health intervention. How would homeless programs in Pacifica work? There are currently 2 models under consideration in our community. The first, a parking permit program would be overseen by the Pacifica Resource Center and prioritize Pacifica residents in motorhomes. In cooperation with the city and Pacifica Police, clients would first be assessed by the county's core access team and then establish case management at our resource center. Participants would sign a guideline and agreement contract and consent to individualized program to seek permanent housing. A permit would allow 24/7 parking in an assigned slot for 29 days, and permits could be renewed if participants remain active in case management. Second, the rotational shelter program. This could function during Pacifica's 5 months of inclement weather, roughly mid-November to mid-April. A host could provide a hot meal and overnight indoor-outdoor respite for clients vetted by the Pacifica Resource Center. Host sites would be rotated, providing 7 nights of rest for every 5 weeks. The program, if established, would be run by a contracting agency like Light Moves. The contracting agency would set up and break down the site each day, stay with clients through the night, escorts clients to and from the site daily, and work closely with the Resource Center, who provide other life staples like showers, laundry, mail, and access to the food pantry. All clients would be receiving case management with the intent to work toward permanent housing. The key goal for both programs is to provide a pathway to stable housing, and the Resource Center has demonstrated their success in assisting homelessness in permanent housing. And with your permission, Delia is going to end up.
Thank you, Suzanne.
Carolyn is.
Carolyn.
Thank you. Thank you. How will safety be assured with these programs? For those receiving parking permits, the Resource Center will be responsible for monitoring behavior and providing feedback through one-on-one case management. Clients will sign agreements, and the Resource Center will evaluate progress. In turn, the Resource Center will assure support on the path to permanent housing and provide a safe legal space to stay while in active case management. For those in the pilot rotational shelter program, trained staff would be on site at all times and would be responsible for escorting clients to and from the host site. What details can be provided on these programs? These programs are still in a phase of development, and more information will be shared soon. The programs do address community concerns such as cost, waste, and trash, safety, liability, and expectation for client participation, such as status of vehicular functioning, goal setting, and behavior. The City, Resource Center, and Faith Community are all working together. Community support will be the key to the success of these pilot programs. The public has submitted important questions to the task force, and these questions are currently under review. It is inevitable that change leads to some level of consternation, and we want to acknowledge voices of community concern. But fear is shared by both housed and unhoused. The homeless have suffered threats, vandalization of property, false accusations, illness, and even death. Knowledge helps to mitigate fear, but knowledge alone is inadequate. Pacifica's pilot programs are modeled after other successful community programs. If we have the public will to test these pilots, we can judge their impact and effectiveness. Knowledge, compassion, and measured risk-taking. These tools are needed to mitigate our fears. And if we are successful, we will help our homeless neighbors find their way home. Thank you.
Thank you, Carolyn. I have two more cards. That's Robin Anderson Wood and Giovanni Guadagnini.
Hi, good evening. Come on, Gio. Thank you for having us tonight. My name is Robin Anderson Wood. I work with hundreds of vulnerable and isolated seniors along the peninsula, many of them who live in the city of Pacifica. Many of them, like my friend here, Gio, who is confined to a wheelchair. And I think, thinking back to the way this meeting was opened, when we give an oath to the United States of America, and it ends with, because of life, liberty, and the pursuit of justice. Gio doesn't have liberty to get around the city of Pacifica freely the way that us who don't have disabilities can navigate so freely and without having to think about getting up and down the sidewalks and getting across the street and navigating just down a simple road without running into poles that are sort of stuck up in the middle of the street and we can't get around them. Gio sort of runs into these issues on a daily basis when he's in Pacifica. And if it's okay, Gio, I'll just go ahead and read your letter.
I'd like to know why.
So Gio wrote this letter to, he wrote this letter to you guys about a year ago. On July 9th at approximately 10:45 p.m. after attending a City of Pacifica council meeting. I was going home. I wanted to catch the bus at the bus stop at Oceana High School. At this location, there is a storm drain where the grass and curb cut meet that is approximately 5 inches deep, and the cement is at a 45-degree angle next to the curb cut. So as you are on the curb cut, you run into the storm drain as it isn't marked and it's hard to see at night. On Paloma and Francisco Streets, I was going up an unmarked curb cut to get on the sidewalk, and it was too narrow and too steep, and I almost fell over to the left side, but was able to back up my power chair to save me from falling. One more minute. He rode into the street to go onto the corner of where Oceana High School is located to catch the bus to go home after the council meeting ended. Because the curb cut is unmarked and not easily visible at night due to a non-working street light, there are no yellow pads or paint to mark the curb cut. His power chair suffered damages to the left front castor, the spindle that holds the tire, and also to the chair frame. Because the spindle that holds the tire and the chair frame got bent, he wore the tire out on 2 sides, so it became lopsided. He had to ride his power chair home in that condition about 1.5 miles from Oceana High School bus stop, and he missed the bus due to damages incurred to his power chair. He wrote this letter to you guys and never got a response. He had to ride in the street going home, not on the sidewalk for safety, because there are power poles located along the center of the entire length of the sidewalk, blocking him and any other handicapped person in a wheelchair or power chair from passing through safely, as there isn't enough room on the sidewalk to pass through. There are no curb cuts that are missing alongside the sidewalks, and they need to be installed with yellow pads and crosswalks installed where the curb cuts are. He wants the curb cuts throughout Pacifica to have the yellow pads for visibility.
Can Giovanni finish that up?
Sure,
Your
and
3 minutes is up.
we want all of the codes brought up to ADA accessibility codes, yeah.
Thank you, Robin. So Giovanni, you're up.
Get the mic.
She read his letter. I have a question. I'd like to know why, after I sued you guys, why you guys put the curb cuts on Fairmont Shopping Center side. And then if you go across the street to Springdale, you have curb cuts there, but going all the way down to the tunnel or the underpass, there's no more curb cuts to go across. I'm not the only handicapped person in Pacifica, in that area on Fairmont. And how come when I have my attorneys talk to you guys about the sidewalks on where the Fish and Bowl is, and then you guys kept saying, oh, it's the developer. Well, why don't you guys fix it and put the street lights in, the sidewalks in, and take the developers to court and sue them before somebody else gets hurt?
Thank you.
And why don't you look in about putting a walk-in bridge over where the freeway exit is, and putting a walk-in bridge over our Rockaway and one over there by Lindemar? And you need to make the sidewalks wider, because from the curb to the grass or going towards the house, the first 5 feet is city property. I know that because I was a plumber and I had to pull permits. They can get the buzzer thing and shove it, because
Okay, so I think, Gio, what you're hearing is just years of frustration with his inability to navigate daily life with ease, the way that all of us are just sort of take for granted on a daily basis. I think what you're hearing from him today is just years of built-up frustration and agony and feeling discriminated against because he can't move around freely like the rest of us can. So I'm happy to share this letter that he wrote about a year ago to you guys, and it would be nice to get a follow-up, at least on some level, just so that he feels acknowledged and that the City of Pacifica cares about people with disabilities and access issues. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I have one more card for oral communications, Lynn Adams, and that's my last yellow card for oral communications.
Good evening, council staff. Thank you for having oral communication. Excuse me. I just wanted to come and announce that the Beach Coalition has planted over 1,000 plants, and without any rain, we've been watering them along the top switch of Lindemar on the coastal trail, and down the trail a bit, and down in the flat, which we call the give back area. I also wanted to announce that the Pacific Beach Coalition is having a book to action project in partnership with the Beach Coalition again. We did it 2 years ago with the book Garbology. This year we're doing it with the book called A Perfect Day for an Albatross. Absolutely gorgeous book that tells the story about albatrosses with the basic information. Done in partnership with Karen LaBelle Freed, who will be a assembly speaker, who's creating the assembly program. And anyone can get this book. They have 200 books at the Sharp Park Library. Many have been given out, but they're still in stock. And the request is that you take action between now and Earth Day, and on Earth Day and EcoFest, with the Pacific Beach Coalition to pick up litter, to join environmental actions. I also want to invite, God willing, you to Earth Day event, which is scheduled for April 25th. God willing, I say, because we don't know what's going on, but we're all systems go at this moment. We want everybody to be safe. We want everybody to make sure that if they're not well, they stay home. But we invite everyone still at this moment to come to beach cleanups and to do good for the environment. So if you'd like a poster, I have them over there. They look like this. Very beautiful. It's a block print by the book author, Karen LaBelle. And finally, I'd like to just announce that the Pacific Beach Coalition has hired an exhibit to go to all 6 Pacifica School District schools. And they will be, they started at Sunset Ridge last week. It's currently at Ocean Shore School. It covers longer than this wall right here of exhibits of block print from the book. That's absolutely gorgeous, along with information about the albatross. It's going to Valimar next week, so all the families of the schools are invited to come there. And then it will be coming to the Sharp Park Library. I think the schedule is on our website, or you can check with Sharp Park Library. They will have it. Half Moon Bay Library will have it, and the 6 schools. So I invite people to participate in Earth Day. Sign up today for your group or your organization, and come make a difference on the 50th anniversary.
Thank you. Lynn, we've got Chris Redfield's the last card now.
Thank you. Good evening again, staff, council. I just want to speak to an item that came to light this week regarding a certain neighborhood and a certain program that was, excuse me, that was put forth as an overnight feasibility study in one of the churches on Perez. Unfortunately, communication, that's key. As I think I've said, ignorance breeds fear. Unfortunately, that came to light through lack of communication through that neighborhood. I understand where they're coming from completely. And I certainly hope that the tar is not being boiled and the pitchforks are not being sharpened by the neighborhood on that event. This is an issue that both the task force and the city, hopefully, are going to collaborate on going forward. And, excuse me, and I sincerely wish that neighborhood, we all learn a lesson from this going forward with communication both from the city, from the task force as we collaborate on certain issues of that. So I just wanted to say that. I would like to put the fears to rest of that neighborhood. A lot of work has gone into figuring out who is in your neighborhood. That was one of my key things for the ordinance to be passed, and I thank all of you for doing that. Again, my thing is an enforcement with compassion. So I think we can move forward on that, but I just think we need to communicate both as a task force and as a city for any programs that we put forth going forward. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I have no more yellow cards for oral communications. I will bring it back to council for council communications. Sue, water loss.
Many, or all of us, had a meeting here with Jackie Spear. It was a noticed meeting. Several went to the seawall with her. We went to the community center, and we also toured the new equalization basin. And it was, of course, one of the most beautiful days in Pacifica when she was here to tour, and it was great. The next day, we did a soft opening of the equalization basin where they've installed a new plaque. It's all ready and striped and ready for people to drive into. I went to the Chamber Awards, Pacifica Sports Hall of Fame. I put Rotary. I voted. I hope everyone voted. That's really important. And the biggest information meeting that I went to was Belmont Council of Cities. And we had people come from Cal OES and Fire Department. South City Fire Department. They developed a plan. They got a $75,000 grant from the county, and it's a software basis that, say, when we had the San Bruno fire, it pinpoints locations for police officers and also connects with Waze and directs people away from the area so that if you're on a GPS, you will be directed away from where the fire is. It was a great program. Also, one of the major things is the San Mateo County alerts. The percentage of people who get the San Mateo County alerts to me is very small. It's something like 26%. Every week we tell people, get on the San Mateo County alerts. So what they're trying to do is make it an opt-out program instead of an opt-in. It's opt-in right now, but if it's an opt-out program, everyone will get the San Mateo County alerts, and it will help greatly in an evacuation if we ever need to have one. Plus, you know what's going on with the San Mateo County alerts. Sometimes you just hear a bobcat was in someone's backyard, but that might be good to know too. And everybody should have it now until we get set up on the full San Mateo County alerts. But I'd like to have at some point a presentation for the community from this evacuation meeting, because it was really informative and I think the community would like to hear about it. So
Thanks,
that was
Sue.
long for me.
Mary Beer.
Okay, good evening, everybody. Thank you for coming out, and being civically engaged is totally important, so I'm glad that you're here. I just wanted to acknowledge the frustration of some of our people who spoke at public comment. I hear you. I just wanted to acknowledge you. So thank you for coming out here tonight. I really appreciate you being here. Okay, so yes, we had quite a busy couple of weeks. I was also at the special meeting with Jackie Spears, and what a wonderful experience it was for me to have the opportunity to meet her and to talk to her and to spend some extended period of time with her and to learn from her. A really awesome day, so I appreciated it so very much. The Age-Friendly Task Force met, and they'll be hosting a housing panel discussion on Wednesday, May 20th at 10 a.m. at the Community Center in collaboration with the Pacifica Senior Services. I attended the Pacifica Sports Hall of Fame dinner, and I have to say that one of my former athletes was inducted to the Hall of Fame. It was a total fluke that I got to be her coach, seriously, but it was really great to be there with her and her family. I went to the Rotary Bowl-a-thon and had some fun times with my co-counsel, which is not what we always get to do, so every opportunity to do that is totally important. I attended the Pacifica Resource Center board retreat, and I just wanted to let everyone know that the Resource Center is seeking board members, so please, if you know anyone or if you are interested in participating on the board, please contact the Pacifica Resource Center. It's a great way to give back to your community. Let's see, I attended the Mental Health Service Administration Steering Committee, where there was an information gathering activity about housing and homelessness. And unfortunately, the Pacifica Prevention Partnership's 4th annual Youth and Family Summit has been postponed. So there's a lot of things that are being postponed in our school districts and in our community, and it's a big bummer. But we will be back, I assure you, so that will happen. And then I wanted to share something. We have a regular person who comes from HIP Housing to the Pacifica Collaborative, so he wanted me to share some talking points with you all. Can you spare a room? That's the main question. Can you spare a room in your house? HIP Housing's home sharing program is a free service to help homeowners or renters with extra space to find a housemate. Home sharing is a long-term living arrangement between someone who has an extra room or an accessory dwelling unit and someone who is looking for a room or an ADU to rent. Homeowners and renters who home share earn an average of $1,000 per month in extra income. HIP Housing screens all applicants, conducts background searches, develops living together agreements, and provides ongoing support to you and your housemate. People share homes to supplement their income, reduce isolation, and to live more independently. And last year, over 100 Pacificans contacted HIP Housing, and 33 were matched. Thanks.
Thanks, Mary. Mike O'Neill.
Basically, we were all a team because I was with Jackie Spear also here in the council chambers. I was at the equalization dinner, attended the chamber installation dinner for their new officers and their awards for different cities, for different businesses in town. And I would like to second Sue Vatterlaus's comments The presentation from the OES is something that's definitely, given the concerns citizens have raised with us about evacuation routes in Pacifica and what to do in the emergency, and the coordination that Pacifica PD and the fire department would have with the other agencies in mutual aid, it would be very, very important for the community to see that presentation. It's web-based. You can print PDFs of it. They said that they had an incident over on Gateway in South San Francisco where they're doing all that building, and they put it on the Wave app, and within 5 minutes there was no traffic there. Sorry. And within 5 minutes, there was no traffic interfering with the first responders to the incident. It was so effective. It's also coordinated with Santa Clara and either Alameda or Contra Costa.
The East Bay, too.
And the East Bay also. Of course, San Francisco doesn't want to play, but I guess, the other 4 counties are involved, and it is going to be eventually a coordinated system so that they will even eventually be able to, let's say you have a child at Ortega School, you work down in Sunnyvale, they'll be able to notify you that your child's been evacuated to Terra Nova or whatever, and that your child's being sent, let's say, to a school over in South City for safety or whatever. So it's a really, really important thing for the citizens to look at. And again, emphasize, do register for the San Mateo County alerts. You get a lot of information just in terms of accidents on the highway, and you want to avoid them, or on different intersections. But the program is really phenomenal, and there was a lot of questions from a lot of council members from on the peninsula, and it's a very good program, and I would really like to see a presentation arranged and for either the council and a separate public meeting, maybe in a couple in the different neighborhoods would be ideal also. I also attended the Sports Hall of Fame, the Rotary Bowl-a-thon. I came in second one time, and then in the second round, we won't mention where I came in. And stuff, but I did hit 1 strike, okay? And 1 strike and 1 spare. All right, so, and then we also all interviewed applicants for the different openings in the different commissions of the city. But I would really recommend that we do that presentation from the Council of Cities for the Cal OES. And they said that Pacifica North County would be able to, our contact to get that done.
Thanks, Mike. Sue Beckmeyer.
A lot of the items that have been mentioned, I was in attendance as well. One of the features that I wanted to mention about Jackie Spears' meeting, and it was also her staff members that were with us. So, many eyes on the projects that we have on our coastline, and a lot of opportunity to interact with her staff. But one of the fun things was we were having lunch at the senior center, and it was Fat Tuesday, which is the day before Mardi Gras Day. So there was a beautiful jambalaya being served, and one of the attendees, it happened to be his 96th birthday. And so it was super exciting that Jackie Spear led Happy Birthday. We all sang Happy Birthday to Kenny, and I was able to get some good pictures for his family. And that was very fun. And it reminded me that I wanted to announce the Senior Services Spaghetti Dinner on May 2nd. I keep seeing the flashing thing because it's near where I drive every day on the community center, but if others don't see it, you might want to mark it on your calendar. It's a very fun event. I don't know if everybody's done it yet, but I had a conference call meeting with the facilitator for our council goal setting. That's in preparation for goal setting to be ready for it, and that, by the way, to remind you, is on Saturday, March 21st. And it's an all day at the police station in the big conference room, right? Okay. Beautification Advisory Committee met. They're honing in on a couple of projects and really wanting to work with the property owners at Manor Shopping Center. It's challenging because there are a lot of them, and getting them to, be partners. and also the the business owners to be partners with beautifying that whole area when you first come off Highway 1 and you first enter into Pacifica, to have it be a little more welcoming, kind of like the way as you go out past Ocean Shore School, the Rotary Club has done a project there to spiff up that little median strip by the freeway, and they're looking to do something like that. So that's an ongoing issue. I had a meeting with Don Horsley. I asked him for some time because I wanted to explore possible funding sources to respond to the need for supportive services for homeless in Pacifica. We hear all the time, and it's the truth, that we had the highest count in the one-day homeless count. We know that there are a lot of folks who live on the coast side unhoused, and I'm hopeful that the county can assist us with funding to address this issue. And what was encouraging to me about that meeting was that he's had outreach from our neighbors to the north and south as well, in terms of working on a collaborative solution, looking at funding, trying to assess what the problem is and how it can best be addressed and what they can do to help support. So we'll keep on that. Regarding to voting, it was very fun to see everyone running around with I voted stickers. And next up will be I responded to the census. Well, I don't think they're going to have stickers, but they should. We'll be reminding everyone about the census to keep it at top of mind, because that's how we get our funding. Money that's allocated for services comes to our city based on the census numbers. It's urgent that we make sure we count absolutely everybody. And then there was the Rotary Bowl-a-thon, which I am probably the world's worst bowler, but I will say I was very proud when I got a strike, finally. But I have to read this, share with co-counsel this response. The lane next door to us had 3 bowlers. That was lane 25. We were on lane 26. The next morning I got a text, lane 25 undefeated. Council members overworked. Go down in 2. We had a bowling shakedown last night. Very exciting. Thank you. And yes, we took a lot of heat for the fact that they had 3 bowlers, we had 4, and they had higher numbers than we did. But it was a good time was had by all.
Thank you. I just wanted to remind those that come for oral communications that the procedure is that we don't reply to oral communication. So if you ask a question, unfortunately, we cannot answer it. That's just the protocol. Sometimes we do make comments, though, in our council communications, and we do hear you. And when we do receive letters or emails or anything that actually is related to any open litigation, we usually defer to our city attorney. So we generally don't reply directly to those. If that ever comes up, we usually advise it. It's been advised against to go through we should go through city attorney. So just make a point. Tiger, appreciate you bringing up the outbreak of COVID-19 and the idea that we should not panic. And I'm just, as mayor, want to make sure that I make a statement here for everyone that we should be concerned, but cautious, concerned, not panic. That's sort of the general messaging. We're attending these federal calls, we're attending local county calls, and the basic messaging is the same. Focus on the things that we know that are basic hygiene things that you would do to avoid the common cold, okay? New direction is to sneeze into your elbow. Wash your hands even more frequently. Yes, Tiger, even more frequently. And try not to touch your face. Also, we're gonna have to evolve and probably not shake hands. I've seen people do feet bump, elbow waves. It can get pretty fun if you are creative. At our commission interviews, it got kind of comical, but that's sort of the new way right now, and just don't get into hysterics right now. There's a county hotline. It's 211. tell those people that are not online, that are your neighbors that may only go out of the house once or twice a week and are very concerned because the only thing that they're seeing is news that can get a bit extreme, but just to let them know that there's a hotline they can call in the county, that we're not taking any extreme measures right now. There is general direction to cancel non-essential events at your discretion, and sort of just do your own quarantining if you feel sick, as you should generally with your own common colds and things like that. So I want to put that out there and just make sure that everyone else is having cautious concern, calm dialogue, especially with those that are not online and receiving next door notices. Connect with Pacifica and or the San Mateo County alerts. One just went out very Pacifica specific just a few hours ago, and I want to thank our police department for taking the lead on that. You see Pacifica, you read it. So just advise people also to sign up for San Mateo County alerts, or sign them up if they're not online. I did that. I did that for my dad when he was in town for a little bit, and it helped because then he could avoid, Highway 1 when we had an accident. So moving on, I also attended the Sports Hall of Fame, and I'm going to say one thing that I said there, which is I want to say thank you, a big thanks to Horace Hinshaw, who keeps this tradition alive and the celebration of each other alive. And if there was a Hall of Fame for people who put on Sports Hall of Fames, Horace Hinshaw would be our #1 pick. So thank you, Horace. Speaking of ADA regulations, there was a couple complaints about our election centers. One in particular of someone who couldn't really stand for that long, having to potentially wait for an hour and then went back home. So I offered to bring their mail-in ballot and drop it off for them. They had alternate method, but it came to our attention, and I'm since going to send a note to the elections officer and just make sure that they have a little bit more control over it, but that there are certain accommodations made for those folks. Also ADA. There's a new bike and pedestrian plan, so anyone who's interested who may be a biker, a pedestrian, with all abilities should check that out. Tomorrow, Wednesday night, there's a Pacifica School District board meeting that has some pretty hot topics on it. If you're interested in that, or you have children in the Pacifica School District, might be something you might want to show up for, send in comments or support. But there's some important things going on there, and you might have seen people on the side of the highway do a little research and find out what's going on, and maybe have an opinion. The EQ Basin, congratulations to the wastewater team and Public Works and everyone who was involved planning to make that happen. We had a soft opening. It was a beautiful day, and congratulations and thank you. What's really cool, though, is that the parking lot now is open out back, and so have at it, folks. Mary, I want to say thank you for bringing that information to us about HIP housing, because it really highlights some of the selfishly, some of the messaging that I've been saying, which is we have to think differently. We have to evolve as humans in this world to become more sustainable with each other and as a community, and if that means that we house share, that's cool, and we're all gonna have to change and be okay with that. We're gonna have to be maybe uncomfortable with some change. There's gonna be more cars parked around us or a few more people in the house next to us, but we have to change, and thank you for bringing that up, Mary. And the last thing I wanted to say was the Peninsula Clean Energy Board meeting. We do a lot of community outreach, and one of the things that we do is reach out to the schools and educate children on the use of clean energy. And there was a $2,000 increase for teacher compensation for those types of outreach. So, Yahoo. And that's, Mike O'Neill has something else to say?
Yeah. Will you finish for me?
Go, I'm all done, Mike.
I did want to mention there's a very important meeting tomorrow, March 10th, at the San Mateo County Board of Supervisors in Redwood City. It's regarding the future of Seton Hospital. The current owner is in bankruptcy, and they could very well be closing Seton Hospital next week. And that's the closest emergency room to Pacifica, and it does serve 80, something like 80% of the emergency room visits there are Medi-Cal, Medicaid people. So it is a major, it is also the largest employer in Daly City of over 1,200 employees. So the Board of Supervisors, they're trying to figure out what to do with it. But from what I have read from different places, that it may close as soon as next week, which would deprive the North Peninsula of the largest emergency room in San Mateo County, in North County. March 10th at 400 County Center, first floor, Board of Supervisors chambers, and it's at 3 o'clock tomorrow.
Okay, thanks, Mike. Sue Vaterlas.
I was going to say that too. I pulled it up to say the date. But also, Jackie Spear has what's called town hall meetings, and they call you on the phone and say, this is Jackie Spear's office. Would you like to attend the town hall meeting? There are thousands and thousands of people online. She had a doctor and Nancy McGee from the school superintendent talking about COVID-19 and what everybody should do. And they give their speeches, and then they allow people who are on the line to come on and ask questions. It's very informative. I listened for about an hour and 20 minutes, and then I had to go on to other things. But if they ever call you, just listen in. Your voice is not heard, so all you have to do is listen. And if you want to ask a question, you can. It's really important. She has great topics. Thank you.
Thanks, Sue. Okay, we'll move on to staff communications.
Thank you, Mayor Martin, council members, Kevin Woodhouse, city manager. I have a couple updates I'd like to provide, and then I'd like to talk a little bit about what the city organization is doing related to COVID-19. First announcement is, as many of the council members mentioned, Congresswoman Spear did her community day visit here in Pacifica. It was a fantastic day. One of the outcomes of that, as we were visiting some of the coastal infrastructure protection projects, was her suggestion that the city be represented at a meeting in her office in DC with Army Corps of Engineering officials. So last week, I went out to DC for less than 24 hours, participated in that meeting, and I think it was a very productive meeting. The hope is, if everything goes as planned, that the Army Corps will get more involved in some of our projects, could lead to helping close very large millions of dollars in funding gaps for some of those projects. So I did that. I wanted to announce another award, yet another award that the city is receiving. I always like announcing these, and this goes out to the Parks, Beaches, and Recreation Department. Will be receiving recognition from the California Park and Recreation Society for the statewide Healthy Play initiative relating to our grant receipt for playground equipment that's being installed both at the community center and the Fairmont, I believe Fairmont West, we call it, area. So we'll be receiving that award at the CPRS convention, if that's happening. I don't know if that is happening. Director Perez could say whether that's been canceled or not the award, but the actual convention. And that's a good segue to talk a little bit about COVID-19. As everyone is aware, this is evolving on a daily basis. A lot of updates, a lot of meeting. The city is pushing out a great deal of information, and as the mayor mentioned, I think a very important message is that not everyone is on SMC alert, not everyone gets the Connect with Pacifica newsletter or is on social media, and so one of the ways to help spread the word, the preventative tips from CDC and from San Mateo County Health, is to talk to anyone and everyone that you interact with in your daily lives, in your meetings, through community service organizations to help get that word out. So we'll continue to put out that information. It is evolving daily, And last Friday, the announcement was made regarding canceling large events, and those are occurring. Councilmember Beer just mentioned one that will be postponed from this Saturday. So as more Pacifica-specific information comes to light, we'll be working to put that information out as well. In terms of essential city services, in these types of instances, we will work to immediately develop a continuity of operations plan for the city if things were to come and close down buildings or employees get sick or what have you. So we've done that work so that all of the city essential services can keep functioning during those times. So, and at this point, what I'd like to do, our Parks, Beaches, and Recreation Department is perhaps the one that has the most and hosts the largest, organizes the largest gatherings of community members, and particularly our seniors. So I'd like Director Perez to talk a little bit about what's happening at the community center and for the seniors.
Good evening, Council. Michael Perez, your Director of Parks, Beaches, and Recreation, and I want to echo what the City Manager said, that the situation is evolving, and as you can imagine, at the city level, there's a lot of talk with other counties. In terms of parks and recreation departments throughout the county, I'm on many listservs and email lists, and we've all been talking a lot about that. And just to piggyback off the CPRS conference, there's some cities who are not sending their staff to this conference, but CPRS is still holding it. As of the 5 o'clock when I left work today, anyway, I have 2 staff members that are supposed to be going there. In particular, what we're doing, by kind of keeping up with folks here, but just a few things that are happening. So at the community center, we're doing more cleaning times. Our staff that don't, it's not part of their job usually to clean, but we are cleaning. We're cleaning doorknobs, we're cleaning door handles, we're cleaning the faucets, trying to run through and make that part of the daily thing. We've got signs everywhere, like some of the ones that are back there, that remind people to wash their hands. And in fact, at the senior center, we just went to a new program where they swipe a card to come in and pick their classes. After they do that, it reminds them to wash their hands. It even says it on the marquee outside at the community center. So trying to do that, remind everybody to do that. At our congregate lunch program, we're putting out more tables with less chairs at them, so we're spreading folks out a little bit more. We're still having congregate lunch, which is our daily Monday through Friday lunch for the senior services. And we've also had in-service trainings to remind staff and volunteers as well about all the precautions that we want to take, again, with the hand washing. And we're looking at our events. Right now we're not canceling lunch, but again, making some modifications to it. We will continue to do Meals on Wheels because that is a very essential service that we provide. And we're going to make sure that that happens. We're taking a look at some events. They're not actually happening right now, but we're considering a little ways out that we have some events where there'll be larger folks there. We're going to have, for now, we're going to cancel the next several rummage sales that we have. And we're looking at a way to kind of redo our volunteer recognition dinner as to not have everybody in that room all together like that. And that's still evolving. And Jim Lang, our recreation manager, has checking in with the county right now for an idea to have a pack and go type lunch program. We anticipate that a lot of people might just stay home and not come to the lunch program because they're worried about being with a lot of people. But right now the county doesn't let us, people can't take their food they have to eat it on site. So it was thought of as a good idea, his suggestion, but they're kind of running it up the flagpole there to see if that was something we could do. And that way they'll still get their meal, and then kind of they won't have to be around everybody if that's a concern of theirs. I'll try to say, and then our other programs, of course, are childcare as well as we're located at 4 school sites, so we've been in contact with the superintendent, talked to them about what they're doing. I mean, if something happens at the school, it's going to impact us, and we're going to follow suit as we would in other emergencies when we have fire danger for the air quality or what have you. If there was, any type of thing that's happening on the school center, it's going to affect us as well. And then we've got lots of precautions going on, lots of hand washing reminders for the kids. When they arrive in the morning, we're having them and any parents or folks that are engaging with others, they're going to be told they need to wash their hands. We've got extra hand sanitizers happening. Our teachers are a lot more aware of the children and, if they're absent, on vacation, where they're going, that type of thing, just trying to check in with people to find out what's going on. There's extra cleaning happening. The child care folks are very into cleaning things anyway, but it's happening a lot more. And we've also sent out, we have a Remind app. It's a text app, so we are able to remind the parent, just kind of like the SMC alert. We can focus in on folks in our program, so if we need to get information out to them, we'll make sure to use that. And the police department put out some great information that we've been sharing. Actually, it's right here. This sign is the stop the spread right here of germs. We've been using that a lot. And again, our other staff at the other programs at the pool, we've got, again, reminding them about different procedures for cleaning and all that kind of thing. So we haven't canceled any of our major events yet, but we're considering. There's cities near us that are canceling up to 100 people, and others are 50 people or more. So we're talking about that with other folks, and we'll probably make some decisions as a few of the events are coming up in the next month or two. That's it. Any questions?
Mike, I got a text on Saturday night asking me if people that are renting, I guess there was some sort of Boy Scout dinner Saturday night at the community center, because I know the high school district's considering stopping all their rentals of the theater and rooms and stuff like that. Right. Are we considering that, or just what's the status of those?
Great question, and again, sharing information with some other cities, and I shared this with the city manager just a couple hours ago. We were talking about South City has gone to if folks want to cancel their events, that's fine. They'll work with them on a refund, and certainly outside of just the rental piece on our end, is these people are probably going to have sort of a self-selecting of their attendees that might say, look, I just don't want to go there. So we haven't made anything official, but we are considering ways in which we can kind of answer folks' concerns and sort of walk them through that.
If you do decide to cancel the event, how much notice are you going to be able to give them? Or I realize it's all in fluid right now. But I
would think we'd probably want to give as much as possible and look out. And we don't know Friday we had kind of a different plan, and things changed a lot over the weekend, and other cities were sort of changing what they're doing. And even with this conference, everybody was going last week, and then as it kind of got closer, we have some people that weren't going and some people that were. So I think we'll try to be as sensitive as possible, and when it comes to a private rental, we'll want to work with the person that's renting it and try to make it as easy as possible. If it's our own event, I think we can, we have a little more flexibility at a sort of a last minute cancel if we need to do that.
Thank you.
Hey, Mike, I just wanted to say, on top of all the work that you're already doing, thank you so much. We're so lucky to have you and all of your staff. Thanks.
My staff is doing most of the work, so
I know,
they should be commended for sure.
If I could just conclude regarding this, because it is evolving daily and different guidance is coming out. Appreciate everyone's understanding and flexibility. In terms of canceling meetings and issues, as things evolve, we may need to look at that, and whether it's a question of future city council meetings needing to be postponed or not. I don't know at this point. I was on a call with the city managers from across the county today, and all of the cities are looking at that. Some commission meetings are being canceled. Some are postponing council meetings. So I'm not saying that that's necessary for us at this point, but just understanding that as this evolves, we'll be looking closely at it and the pros and cons for all of those decisions.
Is that it for staff communications? Okay, great. Okay, we will be moving on to our public hearing. Tonight, we have a city council call-up of a Parks, Beaches, and Recreation Commission's decision to uphold an appeal and deny a heritage tree permit, HT 519-19, for city heritage tree removal at 606 Canyon Drive.
Before we begin, I have to recuse myself based on owning property nearby.
Thank you. Anyone else have to recuse themselves? No? So are we going to get a brief on the count? Mike, you called this up, so do we just go right to staff, or did you want to say why you called it up? That would go right to staff? Okay.
Staff.
Or Cynthia?
So this is a council call-up, which means it doesn't follow, thank you for pointing that out, it doesn't follow our regular hearing structure, so there's no 10-minute appellant, 10-minute, what's the opposite? Rebuttal. Yeah, rebuttal. Yeah, response. So we do have Commissioner Knowles here from Parks, Beaches, and Recreation. Do we want her up there with you? Or is it okay to have her up there with you?
You want her up there.
Yeah, we can grab a seat for Cynthia. Thanks, Sam. Thanks, Cynthia. So, you have a staff report for us?
I do.
Thanks.
Good evening, Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, City Council members. My name is Sam Bautista, your Deputy Director of Public Works. And tonight I do have Erin Clark, the Park Superintendent, along with our consulting arborist, Roy Leggett from Tree Management Services. Tree Management Experts. So the item before you tonight is a City Council call-up of appeal of the City Heritage Tree Removal located at 606 Canyon Drive. It's a Monterey cypress tree, and the heritage tree permit number is HT 51919. Thank you. All right, so I'm just going to give you a brief background about this tree. In 2015 and 2017, the city surveyed and evaluated large trees on city property. The surveys aid in prioritizing activities of the city's tree management staff. The surveys provided tree risk ratings by evaluating location, genus, species, diameter, estimated heights, estimated average spread, existing utilities in proximity to that tree, a tree risk assessment rating, and a tree service recommendation. The city subsequently reviewed trees that were designated as moderate risk in the most recent survey. This survey recommended pruning and/or cabling of many trees, and it also recommended that removal of trees when it is determined that standard pruning procedures are no longer productive. There are currently 4 different risk categories for these trees. The first is a low-risk tree, which the likelihood of failure is unlikely. A moderate risk tree, which the designation in Pacifica means that it denotes a tree where failure is possible, more likely than unlikely. Consequences of failure could be significant or severe, necessary to remove certain trees where it is felt that pruning is no longer productive. And each year, city staff recommends a small number of moderate risk trees for removal because pruning would not be productive. In order to prioritize the work, city staff targets trees that exhibit certain attributes. The next risk factor is a high-risk tree where the likelihood of failure is probable, and extreme, which likelihood of failure is imminent. So this gives you a timeline of the appeal. So the City of Pacifica budgeted the removal of 6 moderate risk trees in the East Sharp Park area in the 2019-20 adopted budget. So on October 10th, in 2019, the city sent out tree removal notices to adjacent property owners and attached removal notices to each tree. A week later, the removal of the Monterey cypress tree located at 606 Canyon Drive was appealed by Ms. Susan Bachman and 4 others listed in the appeal, which is attached to your staff report. On January 22nd, the appeal of the heritage tree permit was discussed at the regularly scheduled meeting of the PB&R Commission. It was a unanimous 5-0 decision to uphold the appeal to deny removal of the Monterey cypress. And on January 29, 2020, written requests submitted to the city clerk requesting city council review of the decision of the January 22nd, 2020 PBR Commission's decision. So I'll turn it over to Aaron so he can discuss the condition of the tree.
So the next part of the presentation is basically responding to the letter that was written by Ms. Bachman. And in the original hearing at the Parks Commission, we read that letter in its entirety, but we're not doing that tonight. And I just want to be clear that by responding to these points in the letter, we're not discounting her concerns. We're just responding from a risk management standpoint. And certainly she'll have a chance to express her opinion on those matters shortly. But one of the things that was raised was the condition of the tree and the decay that was in the trunk. And we had Roy Leggett evaluate that, and the tree remains a moderate risk with a notable lean and a low crown ratio. The low crown ratio, trees crown ratios with low crown ratios tend to add growth in the crown area and not provide much energy for creation of new wood in the lower trunk and root area. There's a paved street adjacent to the tree. That's one of the things we look for in tree evaluation is infrastructure around the tree and try to judge what that means in terms of the root system. Anytime you see that kind of infrastructure, you can assume that there's some compromise of the root system involved. The most likely mode of tree failure in this particular case is limb breakage and high winds. That's pretty typical of our cypress trees, but we're also concerned about the lean angle and the possibility of a complete tree failure. The tree leans, which places an asymmetrical load on the root system, and the direction of the lean makes it so that if the tree were to fail, it is very likely would impact one or both of the homes at 606 and 618 Canyon. There is no damage or broken limbs in the tree canopy. Limb failure and high winds is a problem with Monterey cypress species. Large lower limbs of trees partially break and rest on the ground. That's what you would commonly see on a native tree where the lower limbs haven't been removed. A lot of times you'll see that the lower limbs are cracked and resting on the ground, and then other limbs, as they break, rest on those limbs, and the tree can have easily half of the limbs in the tree broken and still be fine. All those limbs are green and growing fine because they have support. When Monterey cypress trees are grown as street trees, the lower limbs are pruned away to provide infrastructure clearance for roads, houses, overhead wires, etc. This pruning practices encourages the trees to grow substantially taller than they would in a natural setting, and also necessitates the continued removal of lower limbs as they develop cracks, again, because there's no lower limbs for them to rest on, so they have to be removed. This ultimately leads to trees with low live crown ratios, which we discussed earlier, and it also leads to increased damage caused by the limbs as they fail from increasingly higher points in the tree, and therefore have more speed as they come down. And then the Monterey cypresses are prone to developing cracks and due to mechanical stress, and the wood is just generally fairly weak wood. There is no visual indication of any problem associated with the root system. Root damage in Monterey cypress trees is generally a major concern. The tree roots on all trees in Pacifica are in the top 2 feet of soil. That's pretty much true everywhere, but certainly in Northern California where soils are mostly clay. there are no deep roots, and that's definitely a myth that we want to dispel here, that to think that there's roots deep in the ground is not true. The tree is 80 to 100 years old. Construction may have impacted these root systems. Soil is compacted around street trees, depriving them of root systems of oxygen. Of course, that limits root growth also, and a compromised root system will prevent a tree from absorbing necessary nutrients and may affect structural stability. There's a lot more to be said on that, but we'll move on. The tree does not pose a greater risk than other risks associated with living in Pacifica. We're not going to make an attempt to just establish a relative risk between different scenarios at this time. We're only speaking to the risk this tree poses. Normal maintenance procedures on this tree have become less productive, and I personally feel the tree should be removed. The trunk cavity has not been shown to raise the risk factor of the tree. Tree management experts examine the tree trunk decay and feels that there is enough sound wood in the trunk to provide adequate stability. That's certainly fine. The trees try to add new wood faster than the decay can progress in order to maintain trunk stability and root integrity. All trees are decaying. All our cypress trees in town certainly have heart rot. That's quite common, and it doesn't in any way make them more dangerous. But it does mean that all these trees are in a kind of a survival battle, that they have to be healthy enough to put on wood faster than the decay can progress, or it's ultimately slowly losing that battle. And that's, of course, again, where the root systems and the crown ratio and all that stuff comes into effect, whether that tree is probably not at this time, certainly not winning that battle in the long run. But anyway, the tree provides habitat for bee colony and other wildlife. That's certainly true. Again, the city does make every effort to relocate bee colonies when they're encountered. There's no guarantee of success with that. We have been in contact with several beekeepers, and it's, I can say up to this point, we have been successful in other tree removals and relocating bee colonies. It's not something we want to do, obviously, but we do it. And I mean that not cutting down trees with bees in them is not something we want to do. Certainly don't want to hurt bees. Removing the tree could impact the neighboring tree by altering wind loads. Again, this is true. The prevailing winds in Pacifica do tend to come from west to east. The tree being removed on the east side is another large cypress tree, and in this case, the tree is being sheltered by the wind from the other tree. The city does plan to perform additional pruning on the remaining tree as recommended in the report supplied by tree management experts. Every time we cut down a tree where there's adjacent trees together, we always do pruning on the other tree. You have to, because it does change wind loads. But to be clear, both of those trees are recommended for removal in the report. What we are trying to do is not to impact the community largely at any one time. This is a long-term process that we're engaged in to slowly try to increase the safety factor of the city by removing trees and replacing with more appropriate species. We didn't seek to remove both trees at this time for that reason, but they both are very similar in that they're both listed as trees where pruning is no longer going to increase the safety factor. The overall concern about the loss of mature cypress trees along streets in Pacifica, I agree with that, but unfortunately the city does need to reduce the height of the street canopy to manageable levels. Monterey cypress, Monterey pine, blue gum eucalyptus are not native to Pacifica. They do well in the climate, but they're generally considered not suitable as street trees for obvious reasons. And there are large specimens and sizable groves in the city and county parks, open space areas in Pacifica. And again, these are areas where the failure of the trees doesn't create as near catastrophic potential. So we would encourage the city to consider the long-term phase out of these trees as street trees. but, that's debatable. Moderate reasons for removal, moderate risk trees. These trees cannot be pruned to achieve a risk level reduction. So I can't make it a low-risk tree. All the pruning we would ever do would be to try to keep it in the moderate risk realm and try to keep it from proceeding to be what would be a high-risk tree, but those, again, gets a little bit more confusing than that. But the height of the tree, approximately 100 feet, and the proximity of overhead conductors make the tree difficult and thereby expensive to maintain. And the pronounced lean and unbalanced canopy, which could impact at least one home, and the tree has a low crown ratio and a questionable root system. Those are all issues. And again, I want to while we're talking about the proximity of overhead conductors, one of the issues with that tree is if it were to be caught in the act of failing, and believe me, we've caught a lot of trees that were uprooting and were able to remove them before they fell over. Sometimes yes, sometimes no. If that tree were to be shown to be uprooting, there would be no way that the city could address the issue, because the only way you can get to that tree with a bucket truck is to pull into the driveway of the owners of that home, and that would put the truck and the worker directly in line with the direction that the tree is falling. It's not reachable from any other direction because of the power lines. So in the event that we had to respond to that tree in an emergency, we wouldn't be able to do anything about it. In next steps, tree-related ordinances and urban forestry management policies and practice will be a topic for discussion during the scheduled goal-setting meetings on March 2020. Some of the work has already been done, and it will be a significant undertaking. Council had approved funding for the city's hazardous tree removal program in this year's budget, and this tree on Canyon Drive is one that was evaluated for removal under that program. Recommended action is for the City Council to disapprove the Parks and Beach Recreation Commission's decision to uphold this appeal and deny the permit, and approve the heritage tree permit for the removal of this Monterey cypress.
All right, thank you.
Mayor Martin?
Yep.
I also wanted to make a comment. So I'm here tonight, Lorenzo Hines, your Assistant City Manager. I'm here tonight as the city's risk manager, which is one of the many hats that I wear. So I have been working with Public Works on the tree program, and I have gotten a good education from Aaron and Sam and the rest of the team regarding the tree management situation here in Pacifica. I am concerned, and especially when we have instances like this where we have a tree that the city is responsible for, whereas the city is hindered from removing that tree that it is deemed to be removed. We don't question public safety when there is imminent danger there. We have a qualified arborist, I have 2 qualified arborists who are telling us that there are issues with the trees. And I urge you to consider the recommendation. My concern is the interactions that will occur if one of these trees goes down on someone's house, car, or them personally, because then it becomes my issue. And it's usually not a very nice issue to deal with at that point in time. So, so I agree with Public Works and their position on this, and I'll let it go.
Okay, Mary Beer?
Lorenzo, you just mentioned that you've been working on a tree program, right? And you talked about tree management. Is there anything in that tree program about replanting or replenishing?
Well, I think that that's a policy that Public Works is open to exploring. I think that, I don't think they're trying to make Pacifica a desert. We're just trying to manage the trees that we have. And there is conversation about a replanting policy, but we have to make sure we do it in the right way. So there's got to be some discussion about that. The one thing that I've learned, Aaron, feel free to correct me, is that there are a lot of the trees that are here in Pacifica aren't native to Pacifica. And so we've got trees growing in Pacifica that are native to soils that are denser, that are lighter, that are unlike the soil here in Pacifica. And so there is worry that as these trees grow to be 100, 150 feet, that our staff may not be able to maintain them. We've got a bucket truck that reaches a maximum of 70 feet. Okay, reaches a maximum of 70 feet, and we've got a number of trees well over 100 feet. So we're doing the best we can. And, but yeah, I think as far as a replanting policy, yeah, that's something that we would definitely discuss. But I think we're still sort of fine tuning that right now.
And so it's question time, right, not deliberation?
Yeah.
Because I so want to deliberate.
Well, wait, hang on. We're asking questions, then we're going to open it up to the public, and then we'll deliberate.
Okay, well, I have a couple more questions,
Sure.
if that's okay. Commissioner Knowles, Chair Knowles, thank you for being here tonight. I appreciate you being here. I was also on Park, Beach, and Recreation, so I was part of many tree appeals. And so can you talk a little bit about the decision that was made by your commission and anything that stood out to you that you can add to the discussion?
Well, we considered the appellant's reasons and the appeal to maintain the tree is alive and it's part of an ecosystem, and so we heard many people support that. We all did listen to, we really want to thank Aaron for all of his work. We've learned a lot from him, and we all had a tough time, I think, because he's doing his job to protect Pacifica the best he can, yet the trees get bounced around, essentially. They can be bounced around from, because of the appeal process, and then but we also considered the tree management experts report, and I think we considered it to be, well, it's bad, but it's not bad, and it's still just that margin of, okay, it's not as unsafe as it might appear to be. So I believe that's why and one of the reasons why we were in favor of upholding the appeal. But we did have considerable discussion about the process. And it may not be the commission's role to reevaluate that process, but Commissioner Abbott expressed support for reevaluating the process and perhaps developing a more solid urban forestry program. And I also went back to my notes from a year ago at another tree appeal from February 2019, and that's where Commissioner Abbott also expressed support for a long-term tree program that doesn't allow for these trees to be, it's not a solid decision. Aaron's decision isn't, it's respected, but it's also allowed to be overturned. And so how do we deal with that in the future? Perhaps an urban forestry policy that's more defined would be good, but also, I don't know, I think this tree was almost like a tipping point where other tree appeals have not been called up, but perhaps those trees were safer, or there was a serious evaluation and they were deemed safer, but somehow this tree has been called up. And is that a budget issue? Are we supporting too many, are we upholding too many appeals and it's becoming too much of a burden on the city's budget? Or, so I think more things can be clarified. For the PBR Commission, we spend time evaluating the appeal, and then, so it got bounced around. But I respect everyone's concern for safety, and we all do.
And I respect you being here tonight, and I know I'll talk about it in deliberation, sorry.
Sue Beckmeyer.
I would like to hear from our expert from tree management experts on his report, the arborist report that we had appended to our packet, and any other information. I know there was another report that you gave at the Parks, Beaches, and Recreation Commission meeting. Can you speak to it?
Hi, yeah, my name is Roy Leggett, and I'm a consulting arborist. Tree Management Experts is my company. I have been involved in formal risk assessment for the city of Pacifica since 1999. I have seen many hundreds of trees go and many hundreds of them come. There has been new planting. Calera Creek is a great example of that. I want to make sure that everybody understands that the report that I wrote, that is, I guess you could say, somewhat inconclusive, is coming from the risk assessor, Roy Leggett, not from the risk manager, the rest of you. So you have the decision to make based on the facts at hand. I didn't want to make that decision for you. I thought that would be inappropriate. You do have a tree that is top-heavy, one-sided, leaning. It will strike a target. We know the target, as well as strike power lines. Aaron can't get in and do anything about it if something starts to happen. So it's kind of a time bomb for those reasons. I think that the urgency of it is appropriately stated in my report. It's not an imminent hazard. It's not going to fall down under normal conditions. But risk does change during storms. So it wouldn't surprise me if you end up with bad news one day if this tree hangs around for a lot longer. At some point, will go all the way to imminent and fall down. And that's what storms do to trees. I think this is a very good case study for what's going on with these big mature trees in Pacifica. Monterey cypress specifically are your #1 issue right now. You still have a lot of those. They're at an age class or a point in their development and their lifespan where they are not going to be around for too long. They just can't continue for too much longer. It's rare to see Monterey cypress exceed 100 years age. You have quite a few that are probably right around there. So I think it's just a heads up that you're going to have this again and again as trees become a more critical issue. So I didn't get into all the details or read through my report, but I thought that maybe this would at least give you a framework for understanding it a little better.
Thank you. And you mentioned this is your company?
Yes, I own
And
this
how long
company.
have you been doing this work?
Over 30 years. So I worked during the 1990s for the Davy Tree Expert Company, and therefore I now have a contractor's license, which is a consulting qualification. But I also have a Bachelor of Science degree in plant science and ornamental horticulture, and certified arborist and all of that as well.
I have a question. I know it may seem like it's off topic, and maybe I should wait until we have public comment, but there's been, we've received a lot of letters that talk about carbon and the need to have the trees stay in place because of absorbing carbon. I also understand there's some trade-off, even as trees are still living, if they have decay. Can you speak to that at all?
I can. Carbon is in a cycle. So when we introduce carbon into our environment, it's going to cycle through it again and again. It becomes part of our environment. The idea of locking carbon up in trees is all good and well until the tree decays or that wood decays, and with decomposition, it releases the carbon again. So coal is a way that a lot of carbon has been locked up. That process occurred hundreds of millions of years ago during the Carboniferous age when we didn't have fungi decaying wood, so it simply got buried. We could do that again with wood, and we would lock up carbon just like coal locks up carbon. But wood that's in our surface area where it's decomposing, it will release carbon again.
So are you saying that when it's decomposed, when it's got a cavity like this one, this tree does, am I right?
Yeah, it does.
Cavity? So it is in a process of decay?
It's decaying from the inside out or throughout the inside. So it's like a tube or a pipe. So there's an element of it that's solid wood on that outer areas, and then there's a decayed area in the center. So the tree's adding to itself and sequestering carbon in the new wood, and the interior is losing carbon or releasing carbon as it's decaying. So it's kind of at a stable point somewhat in terms of the carbon balance.
Kind of a net?
Kind of probably net zero,
Okay.
more or less. Nobody knows for sure the real number, but.
Thank you. Just one more question, please. Aaron Clark, you are the parks supervisor. Can you talk a little bit about your expertise and your experience, both in the city and maybe in your whole career around trees and your knowledge base?
Well, my experience is a little different than Roy's. I've spent a lot more time climbing around in trees than he has, but he's spent a lot more time evaluating and looked at a lot more trees than I have. I'm very familiar with the trees in Pacifica. I was with the private tree company for 7 years before I started with the city, and I've been with the city 30 years. I'm a certified arborist. I'm a certified climber. I'm a certified power line clearance tree trimmer. I'm a certified tree risk assessor. And I have a lot of experience with Monterey cypress. I'm very good at knowing, how much to cut off a limb to make it stay, and how much, if that limb's going to break. I'm pretty good at looking at them and knowing if there's enough wood to support it, things like that. But I want to be clear on just a couple of quick points, and before we open up the discussion, because these things will come up. Up until now, up until recently, there's no pathogens that have really attacked Monterey cypress trees in Pacifica. There is now, because the weather's changing, we're getting the fungus that there is a disease that's really a problem with Monterey cypress. And unfortunately, it was spread all over the world by shipping Monterey cypresses around the world, and has devastated other cypress populations of different species of cypress all over the world. And now that's showing up in Pacifica. The reason you see those old Monterey cypress trees in Monterey along the coast and stuff is not because that's a good environment for those trees. It's because that environment is so harsh that pathogens can't survive in it, and so those trees live a long time. It's just like when you go to the bristlecone pine forest up in the White Mountains. It's not a good environment for those trees. What it is it's such a harsh environment that nothing attacks the trees, and so the trees live an incredibly long time. So up until now, we've had a lot of cypress failures in Pacifica over the years. Many, many, many. Most people aren't aware of them all. I could sit here and go on for quite some time talking about every individual tree that's fallen over. Every Monterey cypress that's fallen over is absolutely 100% healthy. There's nothing the tree is going to say before it does it to let you know that now it's time to cut this tree down. In urban forestry, a good run urban forestry program, and a lot of people aren't going to want to hear this, but in a professionally run urban forestry program, you cut down a tree at 60% of its lifespan, even if it's healthy. That's what's called a safe, useful life expectancy. And otherwise, you're going to be starting to spend a lot of money, and you're going to start making a lot of guesses about that tree after that point. And the idea that you can, through some sort of procedure, extend the lifespans of these trees on and on and on. All I'm saying here is we've run out of procedures on a lot of these trees. There is no process that I can apply to this tree that's going to increase the safety level of it. So you might be able to keep it at this kind of risk level that it's at now for some period of time, maybe, if the weather cooperates. I'm not worried that that tree is going to fall over tonight. I'm not even worried that tree is going to fall over this winter, to be perfectly honest with you. We haven't had any rain. But we did have an 80-foot pine tree fall over 2 weeks ago on Everglades because of the wind. And that tree fell right where all the kids parked their cars. And luckily it was a Sunday and the kids weren't in school. And it completely covered the entire street. These things are unpredictable. And what I'm saying is the city, going forward, needs to look at the trees it plants. Trees were planted 100 years ago, and I think it's great that people did it. I'm not saying they did anything wrong. They worked with the best information they had available at that time. They probably didn't have the choice of species that we have today, but they basically planted Monterey cypress, Monterey pine, black acacia, and eucalyptus trees. 2 of them are absolutely invasive, non-native. One of them, the Cal Fire is trying to declare a noxious weed and want them all removed. And the others are problematic in terms of size, and Monterey cypress are especially problematic in terms of the weakness of the wood and the tendency to split and lose limbs in high winds. And we have a risk level spread all across town. We have this tree we've picked out with several others like we do every year because we're trying to slowly work toward a safer environment. But if you have a low risk level spread across a lot of specific units, then even if your risk level is 1 or 2% for any particular tree, your risk level on the forest as a whole is 80 or 90% in any given event. And that's exactly the situation we have right now. Any storm we have, we are going to have property damage. We do every single storm. And it doesn't need to be that way because all these trees were introduced trees. This is a completely man-made environment in Pacifica, and we have choices that we can make. We can have a nice environment without the risk. We could manage more trees with less money if we had safer trees and smaller trees. We're spending a lot of money. The cost it would take me to prune this tree, which wouldn't even be effective, I could plant 100 trees with the cost of 1 prune on this tree. So those are the things that people need to start looking at. You know, what are we going to do? And that's all I'm looking for, some direction. I'm telling you, this is a situation I'm in. What am I supposed to do with that? And I don't have a lot of options. And that's all I'm saying. So I don't know if anybody wants to elaborate on that, but.
Okay.
Lorenzo wanted to say something.
Oh, can I ask a question too?
So
or no?
just based on my conversations with Aaron and the rest of the team, this situation that we're hearing about with this particular tree is not unique. And so that's the frustration you see on his face right now. What do I do with this forest of trees that are in need of care and remediation? And that's what he has had to deal with for a number of years.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, I understand that. Thanks, everyone, for the detail. Roy, you said, I think I heard you say that your report was inconclusive.
My report is conclusive that it's a moderate risk tree, and it's conclusive that it leans, and it's conclusive that it has a low life crown ratio or is top heavy. It's conclusive that it has a specific target, and it's conclusive that it has a hollow in it with bees. I actually got a bee sting.
Sorry.
I don't know, it's not a problem. So that tree has elements of my assessment that are conclusive and known, but what to do with it is not conclusive. because it doesn't pose an imminent hazard as of the date of my inspection, but it does have risk that we can't manage or mitigate or reduce. So if you want to continue to maintain a tree like that, it's your call. So that's where it was inconclusive. I'm not giving you something that says this tree really needs to be removed.
Right, okay. So the other question was sort of more a statement where we don't have a tree inventory yet, right? That's one of the things that we hope to do moving forward with now our tree city status. Is that correct?
No, that's correct. We have inventoried street trees that are large enough to present significant risk, and that's basically all the funding we've ever had to do. So we don't have a complete inventory of our trees, and we've never really done any real assessment of our open space trees.
Okay. Because that has come up when we're talking about this Tree City, now becoming a Tree City USA, which is some of the funds that we'll be able to apply for, getting a real inventory of what we have and then being able to grade them, right?
Mayor, I just wanted to piggyback on what Aaron said. We will also be building a layer, well, the city's in the process of looking into a new GIS application.
Yeah.
And so within that application, that's a geographical information system for those folks out there. But what that allows us to do is put certain layers, geographical layers, within that information system for all to see, such as the pipe infrastructure for wastewater, such as the general plan, such as the cannabis retailers, and we can see all that stuff in different layers. And so one of our future plans is to figure out a way to come up with a layer, a very detailed layer of just the trees in Pacifica, and we're going to need Roy and Aaron to help us with that. But right now, Aaron can tell us where the trouble spots are, but what we want to do is figure out a way to ID all of the issues that may be an issue with the trees. And so that's what the GIS application will do for us.
Right. So because the reason I asked, well, was because of our Tree City status, maybe new grant funds available, which is a great start, sort of like our bike and pedestrian master plan. Now we have it. Now we can just go out to find funds to fund some of these projects. So we get an inventory, then we can find the funds to work on a maintenance program or things like that. And one of the pieces of information that I've come across is a community like Pacific Grove, I think, in Monterey County, has some policies that say moderate risk trees stay up, but they're sort of like a default of staying up until they're appealed to come down, or some variation of that policy. And so this sort of sounds, we identified 5 or 6 this year in the 6, okay. So here we are, right? And we're sort of at that crossroads. So I respect this democratic process. One of the questions that did come up from one of the commissioners I thought was a very important one, which was, why is the city council calling this up? And I actually don't know the answer to that question, so I'm going to ask council the answer to that question.
Actually, to facilitate the discussion, because this was a request from the PB&R Commission, was to actually facilitate a discussion on, but it might be more appropriate for the March 21st meeting, of a tree policy and a formal procedures, such as you mentioned for Pacific Grove, for, tree maintenance and stuff. So that's why. And I do think there are other issues. I went up and I looked at this tree, and I think there are some issues, so.
Okay, so the answer, Cindy, is not that the city doesn't have enough funds and we are trying to kind of pull one over on PB&R or whatever. You didn't suggest that, but I don't know what you said. But that's not the answer. The answer is just what Mike said. It's Mike specific, and that's okay. So, cool. We should now probably open it up to the public. And again, we all have 3 minutes oral communications. There's no 10-minute appellant and rebuttal, things like that. So I have a bunch of cards up here. Are we okay? to start? Yep. All right, I'm gonna call you up 3 at a time, so if you wanna kind of line up, you get 3 minutes. Keep it cool, keep it clean, and don't make me ask you to stop talking after 3 minutes, please. Thanks. Okay, Jay, Tiger, and Julie Duffy. Yes, Jay, Tiger, and Julie Duffy.
Hi, Jason Reese. So I live at Loma Vista, around the corner, and I came last time for the PB&R meeting. So, you know, as an overall, all these trees were planted some 80 years ago, and whether these people knew what they were doing or not, they're all on city property. So, all the discussion of what to do with them now is not based on anything in the past, right? Whether they're native or not, they're here now. They support bees, they support the birds, they support what few squirrels we have, and hawks in our neighborhood, which are prevalent. So my suggestion is the same as last time, which is have some kind of a plan to plant some new trees that are reasonable for neighborhoods before you start taking down trees that the people rely on, that, housing values, bees. There is, in this particular case, a very large bee infestation or nest or whatever you want to call it that does put out a swarm every year. And last time at PBR, I figured it out. I've seen this swarm a couple years in a row. I never knew where it comes from. And although it sounds like a bad word, what it does is a swarm goes somewhere else and makes a new colony. So, even if you save that colony, you're going to put it somewhere else. You can't put it back in the neighborhood unless you really go through effort. I don't know, I heard risk management. I heard that it does have adequate trunk bearing. It's on the east side, right? So it's perhaps a little more protective. It is, there was a picture up. I hope you guys saw the picture. There are two trees very close together, within 8-10 foot. Cutting one down, I'm not a proponent of cutting them both down, honestly, but cutting one down certainly is not going to help the other tree. And I also heard it's a moderate risk tree, and it was brought up last session that I'm not entirely sure of this, but this is the beginning of a plan to cut down moderate risk trees. I believe all the high risk trees, this is what I gathered last time, all the high risk trees are now taken down or managed in some way. I'm not clear. But it seemed to me that this was the beginning of the moderate risk tree. Oh, I have one last point. 34 trees were taken down 2 years ago right by the school where the hawks are. So now there's that many less trees. Thank you.
Thank you. Tiger, Julie, and Gail Benton, Shoemaker.
Do you guys want to see the report I have?
If you would like, you can hand it to city clerk and we can, do you need it back though? Do you need it back?
No.
Okay. 1 second, Tiger. Okay, go ahead.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor and Council. I'm Tiger Jazz Twirls, Big Stick of Pacifica. Since it was brought up a moment ago, I am curious as to the symbiotic relationship between potentially the two trees, and perhaps our experts can speak to that if such a thing exists. In the meantime, as I was reading the minutes from the PBR appeal, it was kind of this recurring theme. So I'm just going to read off a handful of sentences that were spoken apparently by a handful of different people, and then draw my conclusion. So these are the quotes. She feels the issue of killing healthy, medium-risk heritage trees is too important to adopt without a transparent urban forest management plan. She urges the city to take a step back until we can adopt a transparent urban forest plan. The city should start planting new trees now so wildlife can reestablish. Do not take this tree out, keep the tree for a set amount of time, and plant new trees. We need a longer-term strategy. She understands there is work to do on that. After listening to these concerns for 8 years, now is the time to take a stance and come up with a strategy. She feels strongly that this is the time to take that pause and come up with a strategy we can work with and take to City Council. And finally, she agrees that we need to reevaluate the current strategy and look for something medium to long term. She thinks we should have a study session. And then I heard these comments, even from staff, that sound like the idea of a tree program, potentially planting more trees when we take down one, is all something that should be, or probably should be considered. And so as I was reading through all this, what my thought was there's a city goal-setting session that's coming up in 2 weeks, and that would be a perfect time to iron out what a proper tree strategy is in our community if there's not already one set in place at this time, which I'm ignorant what it actually is in place. So if it's not there, city goal session is coming up in 2 weeks. That seems like the perfect opportunity to discuss that. After that, now that I have a much better informed opinion, I take my information and use it not to bring an opinion forward. I think the important part, as far as my words tonight, are that the city's strategy should be in place so that we don't need to have an agonized conversation such as this in the future. And after that, between the two parties speaking tonight, I'm sure a resolution will be reached. Thank you.
Thank you, Tiger. Julie Duffy, Gail Ben Shoemaker, and Catherine Curry Maria.
Hi, my name is Julie Duffy. I live on Canyon Drive in Pacifica, California, and I'm speaking for myself and on behalf of Sue Bachman, who could not, unfortunately, make it here today. A lot of what I was going to say has already been discussed, so I'm going on the fly and changing some things here. I do believe thoroughly that the PBRC did their job. They very much thoroughly vetted the condition and the value of the tree. It is designated as a medium or moderate risk tree, not a high risk tree. If there was going to be a problem, it probably would have been designated as a high-risk tree. So we are looking at this in terms of, is this a green light decision to really take a much more aggressive approach with the medium-risk trees? During the storm a couple of weeks ago, where we get very high winds in that canyon, nothing happened to this tree. Nothing fell down, no limbs came off. That happens all the time in this neighborhood, those winds, and that tree is just doing fine. So there isn't an imminent problem that is occurring. I do think that PBR made the right decision to step back. We can, this isn't a definitive decision forever to not remove the tree. It's a step back right now. And there is value, like I said, these are the bees. This picture here is not a picture of bees. This is the bees from the tree. And Sue takes a lot of pictures over the years. They're hanging in her house. I go out to visit them all the time. Sure, they can be relocated. They've been relocated to hives before, but they're part of our neighborhood. So there's no rush to take that out of our neighborhood. I had been trying to figure out how this particular tree made it on the list. I know that a small selection of trees were chosen. It looked like it was being done neighborhood by neighborhood. And from what I can tell, I know one of the neighbors adjacent to the tree had indicated they saw the cavity and thought it was unsafe, and they had been requesting the city to remove it. Sue, the other neighbor, who's also theoretically in the path of a problem, did not know this was going on. She was only able to get her voice heard if she paid an appeal fee. So that has been troubling too, that there is no mechanism to provide input, yet a phone call may have gotten this tree on the list. I hear there's a tree in Valmar that a lot of people want removed. Perhaps this tree money can go to that tree and have that one removed while this one takes a step back. There's bees there, there's some concerns, and readdress it after the city goes through and does a more thorough decision-making process on how to handle these particular trees. Also, just a thought with regards to like global warming, even though these trees are native to Monterey and there's a lot of protections there, With global warming, I don't know if they're not going to be as stable there, and as things get warmer, we're up north. Maybe this will be where they end up stabilizing in terms of a population of trees. So don't rush to judgment. Step back, take some time, and we will see what happens next. Thank you.
Thank you. Gail Benton Shoemaker, Catherine Curry Maria, and Jonathan Maria.
So, as the California poppy is designated a native California plant, the Monterey cypress is also a native California tree. And they are distinctive in Pacifica, iconic, and they are known to live to 150 years. The tree that's being discussed tonight, the consulting arborist report that was reviewed before states there's no reason why this tree should be removed based on the defects identified, and recommends the tree be managed as a moderate risk tree. The appellant, the adjacent property owner in the case, does not want the tree cut down and is willing to assume risk. There are two Monterey cypress next to each other at this address. Scientific evidence has determined that trees communicate and share nutrients through the fungal network in the root system. Removal of one tree could weaken the health of the remaining tree. Trees, we discussed before, combat climate change by sequestering and storing carbon. Mature trees store more carbon than young trees. Destruction of trees releases that carbon into the atmosphere. One item in the staff report regarding this tree is of particular concern. The report states the City of Pacifica seeks to provide a low-risk, sustainable urban forest. The city's high-risk trees have been removed, and now the city is managing 200 moderate-risk trees. If this plan for a low-risk trees means the elimination of moderate-risk trees, this would deplete our urban forest. Neighborhoods like Valimar and Sharp Park would lose character and property value. Removing these trees would additionally contribute to climate change in a town that is fighting sea level rise due to global warming. Unfortunately, it is cheaper to cut down a tree than maintain it. The City of Pacifica does not have sufficient funds in the budget for maintenance of trees, and this is a critical issue that needs to be discussed. Other cities use ABAG funds for risk management or proper Prop 68 funds to maintain trees. Perhaps Pacifica can look to those funds as well. The City of Pacific Grove has a policy of only removing high-risk trees and managing moderate-risk trees. This takes the burden of tree removal decisions off the shoulders of a few individuals in public works. Perhaps Pacifica could take this approach with allowances for citizens' requests to remove individual problematic trees. It has been said that the verdict of this tree hearing is a precedent-setting decision for the fate of the 200 moderate-risk trees. I request that you give this tree a reprieve until it is high risk and work with citizens and city staff to develop a transparent, defined tree policy.
Thank you. Catherine Curry Maria, John Maria, and Naomi Harper.
I am Catherine Curry Maria. I live at 606 Canyon Drive. Madam Mayor and council members, I remember that between the two trees in front of our house at 606 Canyon Drive on city property, there was a third tree. The City of Pacifica removed the tree due to it had fallen over and was leaning against the uphill tree, and it left a stump which is still there and decaying. The uphill tree still remaining is now leaning uphill. Considering in the past that the middle tree fell against the uphill tree, I am worried the uphill tree may fall to the ground. We are concerned that people's property, homes, cars, power lines, etc., may be damaged by falling branches or the tree. The uphill lean of the tree is also a concern that it may come down and damage our home and/or a neighbor's home, or hurt someone walking or driving up the street. When a branch takes down power lines, it has put out power for many homes on our block and has blocked the street in both directions. The city's trees' branches overhang our yard and have damaged and/or destroyed large garden decorations, fencing, and the power line to the roof of our house. This is a constant concern to us that someone may get hurt. Thank you.
Thank you. John, Maria, and Naomi Harper, and Bridget Duffy is my last card.
Good evening, Council. For many years, my wife and I have had a request that the city remove that tall Monterey cypress that is leaning toward our house. Less than halfway up the tree trunk, there are cavities harboring squirrel rooms and a bee colony, which we think weakens the tree. A few years back, the city paid tree pruners who had to climb into the tree out of their buckets, which were fully extended, and these were tall bucket trucks, 90 feet, I think. And they paid them for several days to remove branches from the two 80 to 90 foot tall Monterey cypress along the street in front of our house. I was dismayed at the waste of city funds, which was costing thousands of dollars each day. In the time spent, they could have completely removed my threat and one of the city's problems. My wife and I have had a tall and branching heritage-sized Monterey pine tree removed from our property because it threatened our neighbor's home. No one in the neighborhood objected to that tree removal. We now ask that the city remove the leaning and weakened Monterey cypress that is a threat to our home. I have photos in this book of historical photos of Sharp Park about 1900, and there are no trees at all in these valleys and hills in our neighborhood. We humans have, or Pacificans have brought these trees in, and we must now contend with their demise. Heritage tree size is an arbitrary designation. A heritage tree is also an inheritance tree, which burdens the city to crop or cull them. The city demands property owners to cut their weeds to reduce fuel loading in neighborhoods, and the trees are but tall weeds. Does the city wait for the natural death of a compromised tree, or will you be proactive and take it down now instead of waiting for a popular vote of the neighbors as to whether it is still a medium risk tree or it has become a high risk tree? You can tell by the extensive examination in the report of this tree that Pacifica's tree staff is knowledgeable. This city has financial restraints, and the staff, are trying to keep ahead of the problems.
Thank you. Naomi Harper, Bridget Duffy, and I have a couple more cards, Cindy Abbott and Pam Winston.
Thank you for allowing me to speak. I live at 605 Canyon Drive, directly across the street. I'm Naomi Harper, and I do not want this tree to come down. I absolutely love this tree. I love all the animals and the wildlife that live in this tree and that depend on this tree, and I'm not the only one. What I feel is that the city is using a citizen's complaint for their own agenda to cut trees rather than use funds to trim trees that keep them healthy. If you trim the tree and allow the wind to go through it as if a bird can fly through it, you are really keeping a tree healthy, because then there's no clutter and there's no possibility so much as a limb could fall when the wind can blow through the limbs. The city also is projecting, or rather the Parks and Recreation is projecting a lot of fear and a fear of what could happen. But, I mean, my God, there are no guarantees in life. And why do you want to kill something just because of a fear of what might happen? And the fear is really only maybe, I would say 60% valid, or 40% valid. This tree is only a moderate risk tree. I want to mention that we need to replant, or rather, we need to plant trees 30 years prior to when a tree is thought that it should come down. And I don't believe in taking trees down. Let them come down naturally. And I'm certain that the expense that it might incur if they came down would not be as expensive as has been exaggerated. There are many other cities that have many plans in place that protect the trees, and they do diligence before trees are taken down. The city of Burlingame only removes dead, diseased, or structurally unstable trees. The city of Davis defines hazard tree abatement as the removal of dead or dying trees. And this tree is not dead or dying, and it wouldn't be eligible for removal using the hazardous tree abatement reasoning. The city of Roseville tries to replace 3 trees for every tree removed. The city of San Diego plants 2 replacement trees. We have more benefits by keeping trees in our community than by removing them, and they're going at a very high pace that they're being removed. So I just wish that you take this all into consideration, how many people love the trees.
Thank you. Bridget Duffy, Cindy Abbott, and Pam Whiston-Charbonneau.
Good evening. Nice to be here. Apologize for my outburst last time. I had a couple of cousins die for democracy, so I'm a little bit vested. It's hard for me to just blow it off. Anyway, I have some things to give you too. I always like to start the conversation about trees about the carbon sequestering. When things are green, they're taking in the air just like we take in the air. And when we take in the air, our lungs sequester oxygen. And then we release what we don't use, which is carbon dioxide. And the plants do the exact same opposite thing. They take in what's here, and they sequester the carbon and release the oxygen, and that's why we have a symbiotic relationship. The carbons go down into the roots as the plant decays. Once the plant is completely over with, these carbons start to be deposited in the soil. So if you cut something down in the middle of its growing, it releases all the carbon that it has been using and sequestering. So cutting a live tree down is extremely bad for the environment. And 3 years ago, scientists were giving us dire warnings about the environment. Now, the rainforest started burning down, Australia started burning down. The climate emergency that we were in 3 years ago has gotten really much worse in the last even 6 months or a year. The only mechanism for carbon sequestering that we currently have, although people are looking into all kinds of other inventions, is trees. And the best trees, the most powerful engines, are the oldest trees. So to cut an old, mature tree down, you're cutting one of the only engines we have right now to get rid of the carbon in the air. So I understand the plight because I have neighbors, and I've talked in depth about the heritage tree problem. It is a problem. But and what I want to suggest is that the city start putting some money into looking into some options. One thing that they're doing in Canada is actually cloning these mature trees. So rather than just plant a new tree and wait 25 years for that tree to mature and start sequestering carbon, we can actually clone some of our mature trees before we take them down. In other words, we need to think about this, how we do it, We have an emergency on our hands, and it's irresponsible to just, helter-skelter be still cutting things down at this point. So I hope you save the tree and the bees. The bees are going extinct, and that is true. And Google it if you don't believe me.
Thank you, Bridget. Pamela? Sorry, Cindy Abbott, you're next. And then Pamela.
Okay. So I am Cindy Abbott. For 8 years, I've served on the Parks, Beaches, and Recreation Commission, but tonight I'm speaking as an informed individual, not for the commission at large. As Mayor Martin and Councilperson Beer know, from their service on the PB&R Commission, tree appeals are some of the most difficult things that comes before us. Be it the drought, storms, or increased activity by the city to manage our urban forest, more and more people are coming forward and appealing and raising concerns about the trees in our city. And the commission hasn't always been unanimous in their support of taking a tree down or leaving it up, as documented in our meeting notes. But in this case, it was a unanimous 5-0 vote to not take down this tree at this time. This was done after very thoughtful discussion and deliberation, reviewing all the facts that were presented to us. We reviewed how all high-risk trees have already been removed. The tree in question is one of approximately 200 moderate-risk trees in the city of Pacifica. And we've heard our expert staff tell us on a number of occasions that there's no way of knowing when any tree is going to fall, even if they're not on the list of moderate trees. We reviewed the 2 surveys about this tree and read the arborist report that does state, since decay is relatively minor and response growth is strong, there is no increase in likelihood of failure for the trunk, and this tree remains a moderate risk tree. The recommendations and conclusions were to manage the tree as a moderate risk tree, and that there was no reason based on the defects identified to think anything other than it could be maintained, again, at this time. This tree supports many species. It's adjacent to a second tree of similar age and height, 2 trees that have stood together for 80 or 100 years, and there was concern raised about the impact to the other tree that was there. We know that there was money budgeted, and we talked about that, but we also heard that there was no reason that that money was earmarked only for this tree. There's plenty of others in the community that could stand some work on them. We also received and saw a photograph of trees, these 2 trees over the past 12 years. And we talked about, was there any change in that lean from the time when a photograph was taken in 2007? And we were told there was no change in how that tree looks today than it did 12 years ago. So that 5-0 vote from the commission asked for this to be coupled with a move and a recommendation to develop a much-needed strategy for heritage trees in this city. A strategy that informs the community about our trees, collectively decides how we want to move forward to be a true tree city and to support their environment and what they bring to the city overall. Thanks.
Thanks, Cindy. And Pamela's my last card. If anyone else has anything to say, please fill out a yellow card.
I think I have to use this because I'm really small.
Yeah, that's great.
Okay. Good evening. I think that you may remember that there was a tree on Brighton Road that was taken out to, well, in my opinion, to enlarge a driveway. And they were deemed to replace the tree with 5 other trees in the neighborhood. The tree was deemed a low-risk tree by Aaron, and he was wonderful about stating how he felt about it, but nevertheless, the tree came down to enlarge a driveway. The house is beautiful, the tree is gone, and the neighborhood mourns the tree. But my point is that you've asked these people to put up 5 trees, and only 1 tree has been put in its place. So if that's the case, that there's going to be these trees taken down, who reinforces the fact that there has to be trees to be put back because the heritage law was deemed and then they took the tree down? There was no fine or whatever, even though they did compromise the roots once the tree was, the driveway was starting to be dug up. But my point is that
who will be responsible to follow through on this law that's part of the heritage law, that once the tree comes down, they're supposed to put trees back? So I understand that it's not Aaron's responsibility to find out if these people put the trees back, but I wanted to know who is responsible to find out about the trees that should be in its place, that for the trees that were taken down. So with that said, I feel very sorry if the 2 trees that are here tonight are in question that have to come down, because I know the neighborhood would mourn them. But I do want to say safety first, and I really believe in that. So, you know, it's a tough decision. I really feel for both sides. But if we're going to start a program and say, if you take down these heritage trees, you must replace the trees, there has to be some kind of follow-up. That's my question, who follows up? I know you can't answer, but that's what I want to say.
Thank you. Nancy Hall's my final card. If anyone else wants to say anything, now's your time.
Hello. I'm kind of mixed about these things because I've been very involved in the tree program in my neighborhood. But part of what got me involved was a strange occurrence, which was that I was talking to Aaron about things, and we had a big, huge tree right in the front of my house. And I was getting interested in, you know, the urban forest in my neighborhood and what was going on there. And I started paying attention to some of the people's concerns about certain trees. And I was very, you know, like, oh yeah, come on now, you know, the trees are fine, it's all good, and they can get big, and let's have this big forest, which I love, and I would like all big trees to stay there forever if possible. And one night, I was standing on my front lawn, and a giant chunk of tree came falling down right where I was almost standing. It made me think a little differently about deciding other people's, you know, what kind of risk they had to take, you know. I don't like to think about trees as something that's waiting there to harm you. I mean, they're, you know, that's not the way it is. But Aaron was there, and we both looked at it, and we're like, and I'm like, the tree's not thriving. It's not doing well. It's been trimmed and all this other stuff. But okay, so that's the beginning of this saga. The second half of the saga was we said, we're not going to take the trees down and not do something about it. So we started an organization in our community called the Valley Mark Conservators. We wrote grants. We partnered with the city, we partnered with the local arborists, and we ended up ultimately planting over 300 trees in our neighborhood. And they were trees that were of a mixed, you know, classification. There were some that would probably get pretty big, some that would be more moderate-sized trees, but it was a wide variety of trees. And we had, we put on a big Arbor Day festival, we had a parade, we had fun, we made it work. It was really sad to see some trees come down, but some of the trees had to come down. Some of them had to, and I was a witness to that. And I'm not gonna enforce my feelings about a tree on someone who's feeling like scared to live under that tree. I mean, I have to have some compassion for that person's perspective as well. So finding that middle ground is so important, but also taking action to create an urban forest that we all can live with. And so I'd like to encourage people who have this kind of passion for the trees to take that next step and create an urban forest that we can live with inside of it safely. Thanks, bye.
Thank you, Nancy. We don't have any more yellow cards. Anyone have anything else? Now's your chance. Okay, with that, we will close public comment and come back to council. Any red lights here? Mike?
So just a couple questions here is, in looking at this report here, I guess it's an Excel spreadsheet or whatever, you know, on all the different trees. There are some trees that say severe consequences or whatever, but they're not marked for removal. And I'm assuming when it has the X in the remove column, that's a tree that you want to remove, or you think should be removed, right? But some of the trees that are marked with severe consequences are not marked remove. How come?
Yeah, you're right. This is Roy Leggett again. We have two different matrices that we run risk criteria through in order to come up with a risk rating. If the likelihood of a failure scenario is unlikely, then, like, say it's a big tree, but it's unlikely that it's going to fall down. So total tree failure is unlikely. Even though the consequences would be severe and it would absolutely destroy a home or kill someone, it would still be, through the tree risk assessment system, a low-risk tree, and it would not be a tree that would be removed. So I think a point of clarification that might help everyone understand how our decisions and recommendations have come to be is for moderate risk trees that can't be managed to be low risk trees, and they are increasing to become high risk trees or become high risk or extreme risk trees during storms. Those are trees that we're recommending for removal. We're not recommending removal of all moderate risk trees. That's a little bit of a misconception. It's the trees that can't be managed anymore that concern us. So, yeah, severe consequences exist for pretty much all of your larger trees. And not all of those are even moderate risk. Some are low risk.
And so is part of that risk assessment, like if a branch is falling or the whole tree?
You'll see there are multiple risk assessments done on single trees in certain circumstances. And the reason we do that redundant risk assessment is because we're assessing for different failure scenarios. Whole tree failure, branch failure, maybe a scaffold failure. So there might be even 3 risk assessments in the data where we're trying to look at every different aspect of failure and the consequences of that before we determine what the final risk rating is.
What's a scaffold failure?
I'm sorry, what was that?
Scaffold failure.
Yeah,
Failure.
a scaffold branch or a scaffold limb is one of the main parts of the tree that comes off of the trunk that holds a big chunk of the canopy.
Oh, the branches come off a scaffold and then there's the big trunk, okay.
Yeah, that's right.
I just didn't know the term.
And no, that's fine, it's kind of a term of art. As far as Monterey cypress, a lot of those scaffold branches are as big as whole trees. They're really big. So we want to assess those if it looks like there's potential for failure there.
What's if I remember right, you said that this tree is approximately 100 years old? Or pictures that the gentleman said he had would show that this tree's about 100 years old now, correct?
I don't know the exact age of it. It wouldn't surprise me if it's in the 80 to 100 year range.
And what's the typical lifespan for a Monterey cypress?
Well, part of the public testimony said that Monterey cypress can live to be 150 years old. I don't say that's wrong, but that would be the 1 in 100,000. Most of them go by the wayside after 60 years or more or less. They don't make it even to the halfway point. So it's really just a unique individual that'll make it to those extreme ages, just like with people over 100 years old.
Right. Okay. And then looking, and I don't know, I don't imagine you've done this, but do you have any sort of matrix as to trees that have failed, what they rated, like the one on Everglades the other day? Do you have any, was that tree on this matrix?
Open space tree, no, we had no data on that.
No, it wasn't one of the trees, okay.
Yeah, we've only looked at trees that are large street trees, or street trees that pose risk to the public in a substantial way. There are a lot of other trees in the city that have not ever been inspected.
And then, would you almost say, based on some of what you said, that, I know one speaker said that these are native to California, but in this area, that this is almost an invasive species?
They're native to the Monterey Peninsula, therefore they're called Monterey pine, or Monterey cypress. Monterey pines are native there too. So that's where the Pebble Beach Company is, and Point Lobos. Monterey cypress, I think, in this particular area are in some ways pretty suited to it, but in other ways they're not suited to it. I think the issue here is primarily around the denser urban nature of this site. So you have really large trees with a lot of targets and a lot of impacts from utilities and roads. So the trees are so big that they kind of run out of room or interfere with whatever else you're doing in town. And they also threaten the public. So it's a little different setting. I don't know if you've been to Point Lobos, but it's a state park and it's open space.
Okay. And to the city attorney, I do know, is there possible to have the homeowners sign a hold harmless agreement or something that could actually be recorded on the property, and they would have, if they rent the house out, tenants have to do it, so that the city would have no liability on this if the tree falls?
I'm not sure what vehicle we would have to require them to sign such a hold harmless. So I'm, in this particular situation, there isn't a private property owner who is, requesting anything from the city in terms of a permit. That's usually when we have the ability to require an indemnification of that sort. So in this situation, I can't think of a vehicle that the city could use to require a private property owner to indemnify the city, at least for this tree.
Okay. Thank you. Oh, no, and I did meet with Cindy Abbott regarding this. I went to her place of business, so just letting them read.
Sue Beckmeyer?
A couple questions about this document that was appended to our staff report. It's Appendix A, and it is, I think it's the one you were talking about, Mike. It's a 11-page, approximately 50 lines per page, and it looks like a survey of street trees. Am I correct in that? It doesn't have a title at the very top, so I just want to clarify exactly what this document is.
Yeah. Well, this is the tree risk assessment data. It's all of our work.
Your straight data from your...
Yeah. This is the Excel spreadsheet that Aaron works with every day and that we created for him and maintain.
Okay, and it does have a date, 2017, and I'm also noticing in the packet, there was a listing of 6 trees that you said were going to be removed, and now whether it be this year or soon. There were a couple on Loma, sorry, here, Loma Vista
Yeah,
Terrace.
there's 4 on Loma Vista, I believe.
And Mirador Terrace. So this is part of that group, am I right?
Correct.
And this has been a while since this was determined, or since 2017, is that correct?
Yeah, 3 years have gone
3
by.
years. Okay. So would you say this document would form the basis of a tree policy, or would be one of the contributing documents for a tree policy, such as has been described here, along with specifications around For every tree that's cut, you have to plant so many trees, et cetera. Have you seen documents like that in your professional work?
This would be an appendix to that document. Aaron and I have worked on policy in terms of written policy as well. So together, I think we have a pretty comprehensive way of looking at the trees. You've, I think, had a very thorough presentation today from us.
Yeah.
I don't
I
think
appreciate that, thank you.
well, I don't think that we're moving recklessly through the urban forest and taking trees out unless they really pose problems. And it's really about management problems. It's not about it's not about individuals who want trees or don't want trees or activist sort of ideas. It's about trees that we can't manage anymore, and that's really the motive. And I think that we're pretty pure in that.
I just want to say a couple more things about my thinking on this matter. I heard in the staff presentation that standard pruning procedures are no longer effective or actually productive. I also heard that with moderate risk tree, failure is more likely than not. So from a risk management standpoint, oh, the risk manager's not there. Is that the inaccurate assessment?
Well, moderate risk trees are the exception to the rule in most communities. They're much more commonplace in Pacifica than in most communities.
I would suspect that has something to do with our funding and our lack of a ability to have a tree maintenance program like some of the other cities that were mentioned.
I don't think that it's really to point a finger at your programs or how you're maintaining your trees. Rather, I think it's because you have so many very large species of trees. They just are inherently going to be a lot riskier because there are more targets beneath them. No matter where they fall, they hurt something.
Right.
So you have a big population of big trees here, and most communities don't have that many large trees in their populations. I think that the idea of assessing risk and looking at moderate risk trees as opposed to low risk trees, you're looking at that 1% that actually achieves moderate risk in what I would consider to be a typical tree population. It's a much bigger number in Pacifica.
I see.
It's not 1% here. It's a much bigger percentage.
That's interesting. Thank you for pointing that out. I just want to say one more thing that's on my mind in evaluating all of this and in weighing, and it's in regard to liability. What we've determined from the reports that we've had is that, and from our city attorney, is that the tree presents a dangerous condition. And so what we have to think about, sitting here in this chair, is the likelihood of liability and claims and being fiscally prudent for the city. And it sounds to me like, according to this, to make a claim based on a dangerous condition of public property, a plaintiff must establish, 1, that the city owned or controlled the property, 2, the property was in a dangerous condition at the time of the incident, 3, the dangerous condition created a reasonably foreseeable risk of the kind of injury that occurred, and 4, either A, the city's neglect or wrongful conduct created the dangerous condition, or B, that the city had notice of the dangerous condition. So this seems to me like one of these you knew or you should have known situations, and it strikes me, City Attorney, that this presents a significant liability should this tree go down. Am I right? I know. That's why I get paid the big bucks.
Well, I would say that I think what you've heard here today is that there was an analysis of risk that was done by city staff, our arborists, our tree management expert, and from risk manager, who are saying that this risk for the city, from staff's perspective, is one that is too much for the city to handle, at least from staff's perspective. So whether or not this in fact would create a legal liability, I think from your risk assessors, they would say yes. From a legal standpoint, we would need a court to tell us whether or not in fact that is in fact a dangerous condition of public property. But I think the decision for the council tonight is to decide whether or not your assessment from your risk manager and your arborist experts is a risk that the council is willing to take, because it's clear that there is a risk. The question is, how much of a risk is the council prepared to take with regard to a tree that has been assessed as having a potential for creating damage to property?
Thank you. Mary?
So who does monitor tree replacement? Does anybody have an answer for that? It doesn't all fall on you, does it?
No, actually, that was a really good point that was brought up, and to be perfectly honest, we don't have a really good system in place for that. I can't go onto private property, once something like that and demand to look at a tree, and we don't have any system in place where the person has to provide proof of planting, really, or proof of survivability. Those are things that need to be added to the system. I won't dispute that for a second. We plant trees and we monitor those, and again, we just planted, I think, 30 trees in Valleymar, and to be perfectly clear on that, we've only watered them once, and we were very clear we didn't have the staff time to be able to do that, and volunteers haven't stepped up and followed up with that. So we were hoping for more winter rain, and that's kind of the way we plant around here. We plant and hope for the winter for these trees to get established. To plant trees takes a lot of buy-in from the local residents, and we've had a lot of help in Valleymar over the years, but in other areas of town, there's organizations haven't formed, and we don't really have people to work with. Sandy Ayers in Valleymar has been tremendously helpful the last couple of years in helping select tree species and planting and stuff, but it does take certain individuals in the community to really push that forward.
Okay, I appreciate that, and I do appreciate your expertise, so don't think that I don't for one second honor your expertise, and I'm glad that you're here and you're with our city.
I don't want to waste everybody's time. I want to touch real quick, because there are things that were said that it depends on where you stand, what the perception looks like. From my standpoint, you have to understand that I've been put on notice on every tree in town. There's not a tree out there where somebody hasn't called me up and demanded that I remove it. So if I was responding to everybody, there wouldn't be a tree in town. But any tree that I do remove will have the perspective that I'm responding to the person that wants it removed, because there's a person that wants every tree removed. This tree has been, believe me, it's one of the first ones I check after a storm. And we have a big storm. I'm here, I'm over on Minerva, I'm up on Loma Vista. These are the areas where I go first to look for any damage or any sign of anything. I do worry about these trees. It isn't some, ad hoc thing. We do evaluate it. We do look at these things carefully. And again, these trees are 100 years old. As Roy said, you won't see, the reason these trees are 100 years old is because of the excellent care we've taken of them, not because we haven't taken care of them. It's the work that we've done is the reason these trees are still here. They should have been all removed a long time ago. Most cities would have done that. The idea, again, that there's some trimming technique. It was brought up earlier by somebody that we could thin the foliage out. Honestly, that is the worst thing you can do to a cypress tree. We have lost more cypress trees in this town in the private sector, people's homes, because they hire tree companies, they come out and say, we can thin it out and let the wind blow through the tree, and the tree absolutely falls apart in the first storm. It's the worst thing you can do to a cypress tree. You have to do end weight reduction, which means you take the weight off the end of the limbs, And it's very time-consuming, very difficult. A lot of tree companies, they want to sell people on the thinning thing because it's easy to do, and it sounds great on paper, but what happens is if you take all the limbs off a tree and it's just a piece of wood, and believe me, I've done it a million times, I've removed a lot of trees, you can start shaking that tree and get a wobble in that thing, but if there's one limb on that tree, you can't do it. The limbs actually dampen the movement of the trees, and the foliage on the limbs dampens the movement of the limbs. Once you strip the limb, it's called lion's tailing, and leave all the foliage on the tip, when the wind blows, that thing whips and it breaks, and that's what happens. So again, all I'm saying here is there's nothing we can do to make this tree better. I want to be clear on that. It is what it is, and whether that risk is okay or not, that's for people to discuss. But I want to be clear right here, there is nothing I can do that's going to lower the risk of that tree. So.
Thank you, I appreciate that. So, during my time on the Park, Beach, and Rec Commission, I don't recall one time that there was a 5-0 vote for a tree appeal. So I find that to be very interesting, and Cindy might, think differently, but I don't remember one, and I was only on for a couple years. So I thought that was very significant, actually. And so me, as a former commissioner, I really want to honor the work of our commissions, and I know how much time they put in. I also, so I would hate to like vote on this tree without having some kind of system in place. So I feel like it's completely necessary for us to have a study session and come together to create an urban forestry program. And that's going to take time. And so I'll definitely be bringing that up at goal setting. And so it's my opinion that we need to wait to remove this tree until we have a plan in place to replace it, to replenish the area, to move the bees. Like, there's a lot that has to go into removing this tree. I'm not saying that it doesn't ever need to be removed. However, I think that we need to have a full plan in place so that we can move forward systematically and take care of what needs to be taken care of holistically. And so that's my suggestion for tonight.
Mike O'Neill?
I pretty much agree with both of the commissioners that have, council people that have spoken. I do know it is a hard decision because I do respect the staffs. I respect the consultant, I respect the commission, and I respect the neighbors for their tree. But my personal experience is there's some trees on my property, on my house. 2 of them have fallen and hit my house. The one was the neighbor's, and one was a beautiful day, no wind at all, and all of a sudden the tree hit my house. Okay, then when the guy we called to come and haul the log away, he took in, he's good with a chainsaw because he cuts trees over in Goldgate Park, right? And I had him look at all the other trees, and he says, oh, they all look pretty good. I don't think there's any problem. Again, another storm, another tree fell. Didn't hit my house, but another tree fell. So my personal experience is that you don't know when this is going to happen. And those trees that were on my property that fell were a lot shorter than this one is, okay? I also the liability to the city. We are stewards of the city's assets. These trees are assets to the city. And I think we should not just arbitrarily get rid of them, and I fully agree we need to have a process. There needs to be something done, and that's one thing I heard from Cindy Abbott, and I totally agree with. And just like, maybe the model of Pacific Grove could be adapted to Pacific or whatever. However, there's the liability part to the city, but there's also on my conscience, if that tree falls and hits a house, it's not just the house, but there could be somebody in that house that gets killed because that tree fell on the house. I know there's been trees that have fallen in Valomar several trees that have fallen, and there was one that I think they just missed falling on a bedroom or whatever. So I would have to support staff's recommendation to remove the tree.
And so what about replacing?
Oh, I have no problem with replacing the tree 3-4 ratio. Yeah, I have no problem with that at all.
And the bees, what about the bees?
Said the bees can be relocated to another hive. They've done that. I believe Aaron said they've done that before, haven't they?
Right, I have 3 beekeepers, and again, I'm not promoting moving bees. I don't like to do it. It's not something we want to do, but when we do remove a tree with bees in it, we contact beekeepers, and I've had 2 beekeepers approach me wanting the bees from this tree and are willing to do the removal before we even remove the tree. Generally speaking, what we do is we go out early in the morning and tape up the holes and try to remove that section of the tree with the bees in it and, transport it to a beekeeper. That's usually what we do, but in this case, we have a person that wants to remove them in place. So anyway, it's a problem. There's no doubt about it. We don't, kill bees, but unfortunately there are bees in this tree, and it's one of the unfortunate situations we're dealing with.
I also wanted to make one other comment that what did hit home for me was Aaron's remark that if this tree is falling down and the residents of the neighborhood call, our first responders have no way to deal with this because the tree would be falling in the only direction they have to cut the tree to try to maintain it. So I don't feel it's appropriate for us to vote and deliberately put our first responders in any sort of danger, whether the first responders, Department of Public Works, or police or fire. So that's another issue I have in supporting staff's recommendation.
Deirdre?
I appreciate all the hard work that's gone into this. My question is, the homeowners who would be directly affected, their input was what?
Pardon me, I didn't
The
quite.
homeowners who would be directly affected if this were to fall, what was their input?
Oh, I mean, in their opinion of it?
Yeah.
They're in disagreement.
They don't want to take it down, right?
It's very unusual, and I have a lot of respect for Ms. Bachman in that regard. She is perfectly comfortable with the risk that it poses. The other neighbors are not, so it's kind of a 50-50 split on that one.
Right. Okay. So, like Mary said, I also served on the Parks, Beaches, and Rec Commission. We didn't take these things lightly, and we went out and did a site visit on all these things, and we have a very deep team of subject matter experts that we appreciate and respect your opinions. And I, like Mary, don't think I've ever seen a 5-0 vote. So this must have been, but I can remember one appeal where the tree, they loved the tree, the folks, they loved it, but they wanted it to come down because they kept having to repave their driveway. And they were getting up there in age, and they're getting retired, and they're like, we just can't afford to repave our driveway. And the woman's like crying, saying like, I don't want to take down this tree, but like, we have to take down this tree. And it was such a difficult decision because she wanted to take the tree down, but she didn't want to take the tree down. And so it was just the same emotion that we're all feeling right now, right? It's like, we want to take it down because of risk. So here's the opposite, right? Here's a woman who's saying like, I love the tree, even if it falls on my house, I don't want it to come down, right? But it could fall on my house, and she probably has also these mixed emotions. I live near Mike, and I have had a couple trees removed in my backyard. The most recent cost estimate we got for a eucalyptus removal was upwards of $10,000. And that will fall on my house, and it will actually just kill probably me and my husband. The way it's leaning, and it looks okay for now, but I would love to have the city pay for that. unfortunately, it's going to be on the homeowner. So for this woman to not want to have that, to take on that risk, really, and to want that there, I think that also holds a lot of value. I think that for what it's worth, the fact that you said my report isn't conclusive, you've got a bunch of conclusions, but ultimately whether or not to take it down is inconclusive. There's still a lot of stuff going on with that tree. It's not dead. I appreciate its age, but I also appreciate the idea that if we wait until we get a mitigation program in place, it might make it more palatable for a lot of people. And, you know, Loma Vista keeps coming up. As a matter of fact, I have a friend who lives on Loma Vista, and just food for thought here, they had damage from their tree across the street from their house, and there's like 6 of the trees on Loma Vista are now recommended for coming down. He filed a claim with the city, and they denied it. But now that same tree is being positioned to come down. So just food for thought, everyone. These are not, it's not easy at all. We're put in very difficult situations. As a matter of fact, I don't want to be here. I don't want to be making this decision. I wish that I wish Mike never brought it up, but I respect that you did. This is democracy, and here we are. I think you probably know where I'm going with this, and it's probably going to be a split vote, and I don't know where we go from there, but if someone wants to make a motion.
Mayor Martin, if I could add, because the issue of developing our urban forestry, plan and revising our policies and looking at our ordinances was brought up. I want to be clear that that undertaking is a really significant undertaking that touches every department in the city. Touches finance, it touches obviously the city manager's office, it touches public works, it touches planning, it touches legal. It's going to be expensive, and it's going to take a long time because of the significant amount of public input and engagement that's going to be necessary to talk about and develop every aspect of that, whether it's assessing, removing, planting, every component of it. So when the concept of waiting is mentioned, I just want to be clear to the council that if the council were to prioritize that undertaking as a major goal at goal setting, and city staff were to begin that at the beginning of the new fiscal year, it could be a year before that occurs. So a lot can happen with these trees and storms next winter during that time while we're waiting. So I want to be very, very clear about that potential timeline. We haven't developed specifically the timeline and the scope. We have more information will be coming forward to the council at goal setting about what the potential scope of that type of program is, but it could take a long time.
Thanks. City Attorney?
A couple of things. I would say that if in fact there is a motion and a second and then a split vote, then there would be no action. So that would mean that the decision of the Parks, Beaches, and Recreation Commission would stand. And I would also ask that if there is a motion to not overturn the decision of the Park, Beaches, and Recreation Commission decision, that there be some analysis that, in fact, the council does not believe that this tree poses a risk, because, in fact, you've heard staff's opinion that there is a risk. I think it would be important for the record for the council to indicate that they are not concerned with that risk at this time, so that it does not expose the city to future liability, because council, which you have the right to do, has made a determination that you do not believe that this tree poses a risk. So if there could be some discussion along those lines, because that really is what the subject that the council should be considering right now is, because staff's recommendation is that this particular tree, and we are talking about two separate things, really. We're talking about this particular tree and this particular issue that has arisen from the city's request to remove this one particular tree versus an overall urban forestry program, which the city manager has already indicated that we will probably be discussing during goal setting, which is a separate matter. So there are issues that the council can do with this particular tree that would not be impacted either by or from a more overarching program. But with regard to this particular tree, if the decision is not to remove the tree, I would assume that the council would be making that decision because the council doesn't believe that there is a risk associated with keeping the tree in place, at least for a while longer.
Hearing all that, if there is a split vote, there will probably be not the opportunity to have that discussion with more than 2 people, correct? So that makes it difficult.
Yes, that makes it difficult. So you may want to deliberate a little bit more before somebody makes that motion so that we do have on the record that even if you are making the motion not to remove the tree, it's not because you're dealing with anything other than you don't think that there's a risk, or that one of the reasons is because you don't think there is an immediate, imminent, or even moderate risk of that tree causing any damage in the near future.
City Attorney, so does that mean the 2 that probably will vote to uphold the appeal talk and the other 2 do not talk? Because I personally
no,
feel that there is a liability.
I'm just trying to get the record clear in terms of where the council is going, and if there are council members who believe that they do not feel that there is a risk associated with these trees, that they express that.
Okay.
Okay, so do that now?
Yes.
Or, okay,
Well,
Sue
I think we
Beckmeyer
have
has
to-
something to say.
We have to do the first vote, though, I think.
Well, no,
we're still deliberating.
It's just you're in the deliberation period right now, so.
So I don't think I'm giving you what you want, Michelle, but City Attorney Kenyon, but I do think there is a liability. You asked for, if someone thinks there isn't a liability, to please say so. I'm not in that camp. I do think, we don't know. We heard our experts tell us. We don't know when anything can happen. And we do know that we've had a recommendation from 60 years plus of expertise with trees and deep knowledge of Pacifica's specific situation, even from our consultant, who's been involved with us since 99, what did you say? Yeah, which, thank you, by the way, for that. So for me, it's not easy. Believe me, this is not easy. My heart is pounding. I'm like sweaty palms, but I have to do what I think is correct. And what I think is correct is to overturn this decision and to allow the removal of the tree. With that said, there's some conditions, there's some stipulations. Councilmember Beer brought up a lot of them for me, one of which, and I mean, I know Aaron Clark, he doesn't just go and do things in a haphazard way. There will be a plan. I know there will be a plan, but it might be helpful if we articulate what we want to see in that plan, specifically in regard to the plan to move the bees. It also occurred to me not to make too many matters converge in one place, but we are still waiting to finish our beekeeping conversation that we've started. I don't know if there's anyone in the neighborhood who is a beekeeper, who wants to be part of that. I don't even know if that's practical, but it occurred to me that that might be of interest to somebody. I think the other part I have a question about, and I need to hear about in terms of the conditions, is how do we go about requiring or mandating or affecting the planting of replacement trees, which I realize there is no replacement for an 80-year-old tree, you can't replace one for one, I get it. But if it's a street tree, where, do we have property that we can plant a tree? Or is it strictly in negotiation with the neighborhood around planting it on their property? That's my question. So I don't know how we address that. You got to plant 2 for 1, or however we want to stipulate it, because I don't understand where the land is and who gets to make that decision.
I think that's beyond what the city attorney's asking for now, because you're getting into, do we want a program for urban forestry? I think we all agree to that.
Right.
But I also think at that point, the Sue Vaterlau should have input on that particular aspect.
Absolutely.
This part of saying that we don't think there's a liability is this thing, and the
I get
rest
it.
of it will be discussed in March,
In a separate,
in a separate issue.
Well, not necessarily, though, because if we're going to remove this tree, then we can stipulate that we want to replace the tree, because that's what we were able to do with the Park Beach and Recreation Commission. So we can say that tonight, that there has to be a replacement of, we can say how many trees we want, 3 trees,
that's
9
what I
trees.
thought, Mike.
Okay.
Yes. So, thank you for that answer.
Sorry. Not speaking for you, city attorney. And yeah, this is terribly, terribly hard thing to do. It just is. And, you know, my gut and my experience on Park and the Rec Commission is telling me that this tree is not a liability at this time. And that's exactly what they expressed, 5-0 at the Park and Rec Commission meeting, that this tree is not a liability at this time.
I think that it's somewhat of a liability. I think all of our trees are somewhat of a liability, especially when they're close to homes. But I think given where we are in the winter, I think given the fact that we sort of want to have a few more ducks in a row before we start setting precedents, that it makes sense, given all of these facts, to wait on this moderate risk tree and sort of take a chance. I don't think that we are at imminent risk right now. Just like I don't think my tree behind my house I'm at imminent danger. Now, if we were having a really wild winter right now, I might be singing a different tune here. But, and I would already have my tree cut down probably. But right now, no, I don't think there's an imminent risk.
Oh, sorry.
Go
I have a
ahead.
question. Commissioner Knowles, was there any discussion at your meeting about replacing the tree?
There has always been a proposal to replace, if we fell a tree, remove a tree, that
Right,
it
right.
must be. And that was discussed. Yes, it was.
Okay. Were you going to say something, Sam? Oh, you look like you were going to say something, Sam. I didn't know.
Okay. So at this point, I think we're looking for a motion.
Or no motion would have the same effect. If nobody wants to make a motion, then it would be the same result. And frankly, that would probably be better for the record, unless there's a motion to.
I'm
do
okay if no one wants to make a motion, and the outcome of that inaction would be that the Parks, Beaches, and Recreation decision stands, that the council recommends ensuring that we discuss in our upcoming goal setting the idea of a tree, what do we call it?
Yeah.
Urban tree forest, urban forest.
Tree management.
Thank you. I'm glad I have my compatriots here. And that if and when this tree does come down, that it gets replaced. So we'll probably be coming back to us anyway. Maybe. Maybe not. Am I hearing silence?
Break.
Okay. Okay, so I think that you have it. And we will take a 5-minute break and be back in 5 minutes. Thanks, everyone.
financial plan. The second part is the mid-year. We've already discussed the mid-year, so it's thicker than it needs to be. I just didn't want to burst it apart. But this is the same package that I brought the last time. And I will get through this as quickly and as transparently as possible.
So can we get started with that, Michelle? Okay, great. We will come back to order at 10:12, and items for consideration, we've got the City of Pacifica's long-term financial plan update. Lorenzo?
All right. Mayor Martin, members of the Pacifica City Council, I'm Lorenzo Hines, your Assistant City Manager, and tonight I'm here to present the long-term financial plan update. We were originally intended to present this back on February 24th, but due to time constraints, we had to delay this until this particular council meeting. We're just going to present this report to you and just ask that you accept the long-term financial plan for 2020 through 2030. And so tonight, we start the process for the 2020-21 budget. I got to get used to saying that, 2020-21 budget. And so it always starts with our long-term forecast. Our forecast lays out the revenues, projected revenues, and expenditures. We present a scenario that is most likely or moderate. This is a 10-year forecast. We're just looking at the general funds, and I'll try to be as transparent as I can with my assumptions. So with our assumption rationale, that our revenues and expenditure expectations are based on conservative expectations. Our most likely scenario is based on what staff knows today about the future. Our revenue assumptions do not include the anticipated development of new developments such as residential or commercial or hotel, unless the development's already built into the budget. We have property tax estimates. I've had discussions with directors, and also the impact or non-impact of labor agreements is built into the long-term forecast. Now, this next page is hard to read. And so you've got a packet, you've got a page in your budget book, packet page 197, which lays this out. Now, also in your PowerPoint presentation, I've broken out each of the 10-year forecast into two separate slides. I tried to make the fonts a little bigger and a little more, a bit easier to read. But as you can see, and I'll just go to the bottom line, that our total general fund surplus or deficit in 2021 right now is projected, the deficit is projected to be $318,000. In 2021-22, it grows to $1.1 million. In 22-23, it grows to $829,000, or goes down to $829,000, deficit that is. 23-24 goes down to a deficit of $277,616, and we are positive, at least with the long-term forecast, based on these assumptions for the rest of the term. However, there are some caveats and I'll just go through the revenues first. So our property taxes, the growth factor that I'm using for our property taxes is 4% through fiscal year 24-25 and 2% thereafter. We have signed on consultants from HDL to help us with property taxes. We've had them for sales taxes for a number of years, and now we've got some really good information on property taxes. Their estimate for property taxes is actually higher, but I'm taking a conservative approach, and so I'm going to stop it at 4 or limit it to 4%. Our sales tax is going to grow at about 1 to 2%, and again, that's based on estimates that I received from HDL. Our TOT, I'm going to leave at 5%. However, the base for TOT has gone up thanks to the short-term rental operations, which have added roughly about $400,000 to our revenues. Franchise taxes, we'll leave those at 1%. Business license, we'll leave those at 0.5%. The utility users tax, we'll leave those at 1%. And now for the service charges, I've got them growing at 4.5%. Now the CPI, which is normally how we normally drives the annual growth here, the CPI is about 2.5, 2.6%. So my growth factor is a little higher. And the reason that I left it at 4.5% is that, first of all, I don't believe the CPI is going to stay at 2.5 or 2.6% after we've been seeing 4s for the last few years. Secondly, we are due to have our fees reviewed. And my gut tells me when those fees are reviewed, they will probably grow because they haven't been reviewed since 2013. So I basically left that growth factor at 4.5%. The other revenues, fines and forfeitures, intergovernmental, I left it at 0%. And transfers in, those are forecasted kind of based on the agreed upon activity. So here's a little more information about the revenue assumptions. So for the property taxes, which is 35%, the near-term housing market is expected to remain solid. And so we're conservatively estimating growth of 4% through 24-25 and 2% through 26 through 30. I think I have 29 through 30 there, so my apologies. We may revise this at some point in the future. Vehicle license fee. And this is the first time I've factored in vehicle or have displayed vehicle license fee, but it is 11% of our general fund revenues. And so we expect that the number in the reduction in the number of non-basic aid school districts in San Mateo County to remain at the current level. And if you recall from our last meeting, the VLF dropped off about $600,000 this year. And it was because the non-basic aid school districts dropped from 8 to 6. And so that was responsible for a $600,000 drop. We dropped the base down to $3.5 million, and we grew it at 4% from that point through 24-25 and 1% through, again, that should be 2026 through 30. Our HDL consultants are projecting a VLF fee that is higher than that $3.5 million. I'm just being transparent here. Their estimates are well over $4 million. However, this year we were projected to get $4.4 million in VLF. I budgeted 4.1 because I didn't think all 4.4 would come in. Turns out my 4.1 was even off. We ended up with 3.5. So I'm going to stay with 3.5, and I'm going to grow it from there. And if it comes in higher and nobody takes that money away from us, then I will come in here and plead the fifth, or plead before you and say I'm sorry that I underestimated those revenues. Retail sales tax, so we're estimating the sales tax to increase by 1 to 2% annually. And the TOT, we're hoping that stays steady at 0.5% annually. We've got the short-term rentals that we've gotten regulatory, we've got a regulatory sort of framework around them now. We've also got the hotels, which will hopefully complete the construction of extra rooms, and so we hope that growth will continue. As far as the impact of commercial activities, these estimates may be impacted by future commercial activities. Efforts are in the very early stages of development, and so it's hard to speculate at this time. But if there is future hotel development or any other economic activity, we believe the result could result in another $600,000 to $800,000 annually in TOT if we can get everything that's currently being constructed or planned to be constructed. And apparently that includes Hampton Inn Spring Hill Suites as well. So let's talk about the expense assumptions. And the summary of the general fund expenditures, so our three largest drivers of expenses are salaries, pension costs, and health care. Our salaries and wages, given that all of our labor contracts, except for one, have been settled, and all of the ones that have been settled have increases of 2% annually, as well as various incentive pays. And so all of those that have been signed are valid through June 2021. And so you will see that the salary line item in the long-term forecast freezes at 2021. And we will be back at the bargaining table with all units probably next January. So I've got about 7 months to recuperate, and then we're back at it again. The other significant costs, which we went over last time, are the pensions. And so you all know the story about PERS dropping their discount rate, and last time I did go over the increase in pensions for you all. And so we're expecting an impact of $200,000 to $800,000 annually for the next 4 or 5 years. So as a matter of fact, that big jump that you see in 21, 22, a lot of that has to do with that pension line item. You'll see that the pension expense jumps from 5.6 up to 7, and then rises from there. So we're hoping that PERS's estimates, or I'm hoping PERS's estimates are too aggressive, and maybe that number won't be as high, but we'll see. Other significant costs, all of our debt service has been factored in here, and we have refunded or refinanced as many of our debt instruments as we can to take advantage of the lower interest rates. And so we've got other costs. So the forecast reflects $800,000 in additional projected expenditures that reflect expenditures that are currently supported with one-time funding. And so when we built this year's budget, there were a lot of things in there with one-time funding. However, those items are actually needed for ongoing activities and need to be recurring on an annual basis. And these expenses are sort of characterized as priority-based budgeting, our labor and policy development, which we're doing in HR, the information technology network and all those related expenditures, and so there are, and periodic elections costs. So there are a number of things that, again, that are funded with one-time dollars that we need to make ongoing. And so I have basically added that $800,000 into the expense line item going forward. So as far as our financial future, the product of matching the revenues forecast with the likely expenditures is shown. And each year, the city manager Woodhouse, will bring forward and recommend a balanced budget for council consideration. Because of the variety of uncertainties that affect the city's finances, these projections are updated each year. And staff, however, may revise the 2021 forecast in the coming months based on the receipts received during the winter and spring. And I am open to questions if you have them.
Sue Beckmeyer.
Thank you for that presentation. I'm referring to the long-term financial plan spreadsheet, and if you could please, I know you just said it, but it's been a long night. Under the expense item, if you could please describe again what departmental expense is and what other services / charges are. I understand what salaries and wages and personnel benefits and pension expenses are, but I need to, like, in light of, from a departmental standpoint, such as Public Works, where does that fit?
There are a number of expense line items for conferences, training, I'm trying to remember, and conferences, training, we've got a whole schedule of expenditures for each program within each department. And so I've broken those down, and I don't have my notes with me.
It's okay, I should have asked you before.
But I know that those have to do with conferences, training. Now, with other services and charges, that's more like contracts and legal or contracts that Public Works has for the tree service with Roy Leggett. And so all of those contracts are built into the others. And so, but everything that's not built in the contracts is usually built into the departmental expense. Departmental expense also contains the internal service charges, like for the information technologies charges and things like that.
Thank you.
Okay.
Anyone have any other
I'll
comments?
have a question. In the income, since we really only have one recreational marijuana dispensary open, the other one is just a medical.
Yes.
So our income from that has not greatly increased like we expected because this other places are not open.
Right.
Do we hope to like nudge them along or get them going so that we can get additional revenue?
That's,
Mike. Oh.
yeah. I would imagine that is the plan. We did pass this ordinance with the expectation that we would have 6 outlets. We currently have 2. I don't know where those other 4 are in their process. You know, the impact of the 2 that we have are built into this budget. I don't know what's going to happen to those revenues once that market is split into 3, into 4, into 5, into 6. I don't know if the revenues will continue to rise or if they're just going to split the revenues that we currently have. That I don't know. But I believe that there is, within the city administration, there is monitoring and encouragement trying to get those other 4 up to speed.
Thank you.
Where do we consider, no. So the disaster accounting fund?
Fund 38.
Fund
Right.
38.
So that isn't, this is Fund 1. This is our general fund. So Fund 38 is our fund for absorbing and reconciling all disaster-related expenses and revenues. And that's also where our ERAF now sits.
Okay, so that's where my question is. I guess not on this.
Okay. Did you have a specific question?
My specific question is, if we needed to declare an emergency because of the COVID-19 outbreak, is that where we would get some funding for
Yes.
that locally? Okay, that was my question.
And we also have a general fund balance now, too. So we're good.
Great, that's awesome. Thanks for the good work.
Sure.
Anyone have any other questions? I don't have any cards on this item.
I thought we had one.
Oh, Bridget Duffy, are you here? No. Thank you for the reminder. So she's not here. Anyone have anything else? No? Is that our last item? Okay, seeing as that is our last item, I will end this meeting at 10:31 PM. Thank you.
Thank you.